We live in a world full of contradictions, where trying harder often gets you less, where connection leads to isolation, where the chase for happiness quietly breeds discontent. These are the hidden riddles of modern life, the paradoxes that shape our choices, our emotions, and our identities without us even realizing it. In this journey, we'll explore the unexpected truths that lie beneath the surface, the kind of truths that don't shout, but whisper, the kind that unravel what you thought you knew and leave you with something deeper. The likability paradox. We all want to be liked. It's one of the most basic human desires. Long before we sought wealth or success, we sought belonging. In tribes, in villages, in schools, and in boardrooms, the need to be liked has followed us like a shadow. But there's a strange thing about this desire. The more we chase after it, the more it slips through our fingers. You smile wider, agree more, laugh louder, and yet somehow you begin to feel invisible. That magnetic pull you hope to create feels forced. People don't respond the way you want them to, and worse, they may begin to see right through you. This is the likability paradox, the unsettling truth that trying too hard to be liked often makes you less likable. People are surprisingly good at detecting when someone isn't being real. You might think you're being friendly or polite, but underneath that friendliness is a quiet current of desperation. It hums beneath your words, twists your posture, colors your laugh. And most people won't say anything, but they feel it. They sense that you're bending yourself into shapes just to be accepted. And this bending doesn't inspire admiration. It creates discomfort, like someone laughing just a little too long at a joke, or nodding so enthusiastically it feels rehearsed. We sense when someone isn't anchored in themselves. And when that happens, we instinctively pull away. What's more confusing is that the very qualities that make someone genuinely likable are usually at odds with the behaviors people adopt when they're trying to be liked. Confidence, authenticity, calm presence, these tend to attract others naturally. But the effort to be liked often overrides these qualities. It replaces calm with anxiety, confidence with self-censorship, authenticity with performance. You become a mirror of what you think others want, not a reflection of who you really are. And the irony is that in trying to connect, you disconnect from your own center. You become harder to read, harder to trust, harder to admire. At the root of this paradox is fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of being alone, the fear that if you show up as you are, it won't be enough. And that fear whispers in your ear, shaping your tone, filtering your words, urging you to say the right thing. You become cautious, calculating, overly agreeable. But the most likable people aren't those who are agreeable, they're those who are grounded. They speak their mind kindly. They're comfortable with silence. They laugh because they find things funny, not because they're trying to be liked. There's no strain in their presence, no hunger behind their smile. You might think being likable means being nice, but niceness can be a trap. It often becomes a performance, a kind of emotional currency you offer in exchange for approval. True likability doesn't come from trying to please everyone. It comes from being comfortable with not pleasing everyone. It's okay if not everyone likes you. In fact, it's inevitable. The person who can accept this becomes free. They stop trying to read the room obsessively. They stop molding themselves to fit others' expectations. And ironically, this freedom is magnetic. Because when someone is comfortable in their own skin, we want to be near them. Their self-acceptance invites us to accept ourselves too. Another part of the likability paradox lies in attention. The more we crave others' attention, the more it feels unnatural. People can tell when you're looking to be seen, and it can feel exhausting. But when someone is focused not on being liked, but on being present, on actually listening, observing, and simply being, others feel it. Presence is rare. It's powerful. It makes people feel safe. You don't have to impress someone to make an impact. In fact, some of the most likable people barely talk about themselves at all. They ask real questions. They listen with interest. They make others feel seen, not by trying, but by being genuinely curious and engaged. There's also a quiet strength in not needing validation. Think of someone you admire, not for their popularity, but for their presence. Chances are they don't bend for approval. They might be kind, even warm, but they don't fawn. They don't flatter excessively. They don't shrink themselves to avoid conflict or inflate themselves to seem impressive. There's a calmness in how they carry themselves. That calmness says, "I'm okay with who I am. I hope you like me, but I'll be fine if you don't." That, right there, is the essence of authentic likability. It's not a performance. It's a byproduct of peace with oneself. Of course, the need to be liked isn't inherently bad. It's natural. We are social creatures. But when this need drives your behavior, you lose your center. You might find yourself agreeing with things you don't actually believe, laughing at things that don't amuse you, staying silent when you want to speak up. Over time, these small compromises add up. They erode your sense of self, and, in the process, people begin to see you as someone who blends in, not someone who stands out. Likability, rooted in people-pleasing, is fragile. It vanishes the moment you draw a boundary, say no, or show your true opinions. The solution is counterintuitive. If you want to be more likable, stop trying to be liked. Focus instead on being whole. Be honest, gently. Be kind, but not at the expense of your truth. Let silence breathe. Let others speak. Let your presence speak more than your words. There's power in stillness, in being centered, and it's in that stillness that people feel drawn to you, not because you're trying to pull them, but because you're rooted. People trust what feels real. They feel safe around what doesn't shift with every opinion in the room. You don't have to be perfect to be likable. You just have to be consistent. The person who's likable on Monday and aloof on Tuesday leaves people confused, but the one who shows up fully, flawed but grounded, is easier to connect with. Likability's not about sparkle or charisma. It's about safety, presence, and honesty. Can people count on you to be real? Can they relax in your presence? Can they trust that you mean what you say? If the answer is yes, you don't need to chase their affection. It will come naturally. Sometimes, the most likable thing you can do is say no, or speak a hard truth with compassion, or walk away from something that doesn't feel right. These aren't acts of rudeness, they're acts of self-respect. And self-respect is deeply attractive. It signals that you know your worth. It teaches others how to treat you, and it teaches them something about their own worth too. Because when you stand tall in your truth, you give others silent permission to do the same. Likability in this way becomes a quiet revolution. It's not about being liked, it's about being real. It's a strange thing to stop trying so hard and yet be received better. But this is the heart of the paradox. Effortlessness reads as confidence. Desperation reads as discomfort. The more you relax into yourself, the more space you create for others to do the same. You become a calm center in a loud world. And in that stillness, people don't just like you, they remember you. Because you offered them something rare, a moment of genuine presence, untouched by pretense or performance. And so, the path to being liked begins with a letting go. Let go of the need to be everything to everyone. Let go of the urge to monitor how every word lands. Let go of the pressure to entertain, impress, or fit in. Return to yourself. Speak clearly. Listen deeply. Laugh when you feel joy. Share what you love, not what you think others want. The paradox resolves itself when you understand this. People don't like you for trying to be likable. They like you for being you. The failure-success paradox. Failure has a bitter taste. It stings. It lingers. It leaves behind a residue of doubt and disappointment that's hard to wash off. Most people avoid it at all costs. They play it safe. They lower the bar. They hesitate to leap because failure feels like falling. But what if the truth was this? Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path to it. The more you fail, the more likely you are to succeed, not in spite of those failures, but because of them. This is the failure-success paradox, that each failure you endure quietly increases the odds that you will eventually win. Failure teaches in a way that success never can. When something works, you rarely pause to examine why, but when it doesn't, you're forced to look closer. You reflect, you rework, you begin to understand the finer details, the subtle missteps, the overlooked factors, the silent forces working against you. Failure strips away illusion. It brings you face to face with reality, unpolished and unforgiving. And in that confrontation, you grow. You become sharper, stronger, more resilient. With each setback, your understanding deepens, and when success finally arrives, it arrives on the shoulders of those very failures. Most people admire success, but misunderstand it. They think of it as a sudden event, a lucky break, a final destination. But true success is built in layers, layers of trial, error, correction, and relentless persistence. Behind every great achievement is a long, quiet trail of disappointments that no one sees. A best-selling author has drawers full of rejected drafts. A successful entrepreneur has a resume of failed ventures. An Olympic athlete has a history of missed opportunities, wrong turns, and painful injuries. Success does not come to those who avoid failure. It comes to those who are willing to fail over and over, without giving up. The paradox becomes clear when you realize that every failure carries a hidden seed of progress. If you pay attention, each mistake leaves a mark of instruction. Each rejection carves away what doesn't work, narrowing your aim toward what might. Over time, you begin to fail smarter. You begin to recognize patterns. You start building a kind of mental map of what not to do, which quietly steers you toward what does work. In this way, failure is not a wall, it's a compass. It doesn't stop your journey, it redirects it. But here's the twist. The more you fail, the less fear you have of it. And this makes you dangerous, in a good way. Most people are paralyzed by the fear of looking foolish, of wasting time, of being wrong. But when you've failed enough times, those fears lose their grip. You begin to see failure as just part of the process, like an athlete sees sweat or an artist sees drafts. The sting is still there, but it's familiar now. It no longer surprises you. And in that familiarity, you find freedom. You become more willing to take risks, to push further, to try what others are too afraid to try. This is why those who fail the most often end up winning the most. Not because they are better, not because they are luckier, but because they stayed in the game longer. They kept swinging. They kept learning. They didn't let one failure define them. They let each failure refine them. And refinement is what success is made of. It's a process of sharpening, of shedding, of evolving. And that process only happens through the crucible of failure. You may think failure is a sign you're not cut out for something, but more often it's a sign that you're on the right track, just not there yet. Think about a toddler learning to walk. They fall hundreds of times. They bump into things, they wobble, but they don't take those falls personally. They don't conclude that walking is not for them. They try again, and again, and one day, without fanfare, they take a step, then another, and suddenly they're walking. The failures didn't stop them. They made the step possible. Why should your journey be any different? The truth is, success is often just one more failure away. But you won't know which one until you keep going. And this is the part where most people quit. Right before the breakthrough. Right before the moment things start to click. Because failure doesn't just test your skills, it tests your spirit. It whispers, maybe this isn't worth it. It tempts you to believe that effort is meaningless, but if you hold steady, if you keep moving through that storm of doubt, you discover something on the other side: resilience. And that resilience becomes your foundation. The failure-success paradox also reveals something deeper about identity. When you try and fail, you are forced to separate who you are from what you do. You begin to understand that failure is an event, not a verdict. It happened, but it is not you. And this realization is powerful. It means you can keep growing. You can keep trying. You can reinvent. People who avoid failure often avoid growth. But those who embrace it become adaptive, flexible, unstoppable, because they know that failure is not the end. It's a detour, sometimes even a shortcut if you're willing to learn from it. There's also a certain humility that comes from failing. It softens the ego. It makes you more patient, more empathetic. You begin to understand that everyone is struggling with something, that behind every smile might be a dozen unseen defeats. And this awareness changes how you treat others. You become kinder, more generous with encouragement, more forgiving of mistakes. Not just in others, but in yourself. And in this way, failure doesn't just shape your career or your craft, it shapes your character. The world often celebrates the finished product, but forgets the messy process behind it. It shows you the highlight reel, but skips the rehearsal. But real success, the kind that lasts, is born from struggle, from repetition, from failure that no one claps for. And it's in that unseen space that something remarkable happens. You stop chasing approval, you stop needing validation. You begin to work not for applause, but for mastery. And mastery only comes to those who are willing to fail, adjust, and keep going. You will fail, that is certain. But the question is not whether you will fail, it's whether you will stay down. Whether you will let that failure define your story or refine your path. The most successful people you know have failed more than you. They just didn't let it stop them. They learned, they adapted, they kept going. That's the paradox. Success looks like confidence and clarity from the outside, but on the inside it is often built from the bricks of repeated failure, each one laid with grit, with grace, and with quiet resolve. So if you're failing, good. It means you're trying. It means you're learning. It means you're in motion. Every mistake you make sharpens your instincts. Every setback adds another layer of wisdom. Every rejection brings you closer to resilience. The only true failure is quitting. The only permanent defeat is walking away from something you still believe in. As long as you're willing to rise again, you are not losing. You are evolving. The failure-success paradox invites you to reframe what it means to fall short. It asks you to see failure not as a pit, but as a forge, a place where raw material is shaped into strength, a space where your future self is quietly being built, not in comfort, not in ease, but in struggle, in resistance, in that uncomfortable space between what you tried and what didn't work. It is here, in the ashes of a failed attempt, that the seeds of something better begin to grow. And so, the path is clear. Don't resist failure. Don't fear it. Welcome it as a mentor, as a mirror, as a silent partner in your journey toward success. Let it teach you. Let it test you. Let it toughen you. Because in time, you will look back at every failure, not with regret, but with gratitude. You will see how each misstep brought you closer to your center, how each mistake shaped your momentum, and how each fall was not a defeat, but a step towards something greater. Success, in the end, belongs to those who have failed enough to earn it, not by avoiding difficulty, but by embracing it, by leaning into discomfort, by learning when others quit. The more you fail, the more you learn. The more you learn, the better you become. And the better you become, the closer you get to success. That's the paradox. And if you're willing to endure it, you'll find that what once felt like falling was actually flying in disguise. The fear growth paradox. Fear is a signal. It's a whisper in the dark, a tightening in the chest, a subtle voice that says, "Turn back." It doesn't shout. It rarely explains itself, but it grips you. You feel it in your gut when you speak up, when you take a risk, when you dare to try something new. It often appears when you're standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. And here lies the paradox. The more afraid you feel, the more that thing may be exactly what you need to do. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's where growth lives. This is the fear growth paradox, the idea that your greatest expansion often waits on the other side of your greatest resistance. Fear, at its root, is designed to protect. It's ancient. It kept our ancestors alive. But the same fear that once warned of predators now warns us away from discomfort, from uncertainty, from vulnerability. It tells us not to speak in public, not to quit the job that drains us, not to say how we really feel. But most of the time, what fear is really protecting isn't our safety. It's our comfort. It's the illusion of control. And so, it builds walls around the very areas where growth is trying to break through. The scarier something feels, the more likely it's a doorway, a threshold, a passage into a new version of yourself. The fear growth paradox teaches us to use fear as a compass. Not every fear, of course. Some fear is rooted in real threat, but most of the fears that haunt us day to day are emotional, psychological, imagined. The fear of failure, the fear of being seen, the fear of judgment. These fears don't keep us alive, they keep us small. They don't protect, they restrict. And yet, when you feel fear, it means you care. It means something important is at stake. That presentation that makes your hands shake? That's growth calling. That conversation you keep putting off? That's evolution waiting. That idea you can't stop thinking about but feel too afraid to start? That's where your soul is pointing. We tend to think of fear as a stop sign, but what if it's a green light? What if fear isn't telling you to halt, but to pay attention? What if it's a flare marking the exact point where change begins? Think back to the moments in your life when you changed the most. Were you comfortable? Were you calm? Or were you trembling? Did your voice shake? Did your hands sweat? Did your mind whisper 100 reasons to run? Growth rarely feels like expansion in the moment. It feels like resistance, like uncertainty, like fear. And yet, once you pass through, the fear doesn't last, but the growth does. The more something scares you, the more it matters, because fear points to stakes. You don't fear things that don't matter to you. You don't fear reading a menu or brushing your teeth, but you might fear speaking your truth, pursuing your calling, or leaving a familiar situation. And that's because those actions carry weight. They change things. They risk failure. But more importantly, they risk success. They risk transformation. And transformation is always scary because it requires the death of the familiar. It asks you to let go of who you were in order to become who you could be. Fear also has a strange way of disguising potential. What you fear most often reveals what you want most. You fear writing the book because, deep down, you want to write it. You fear starting the business because a part of you believes it could actually work. You fear vulnerability because you long for real connection. Fear isn't a wall, it's a mirror. It reflects back your deepest desires, dressed in discomfort. And when you learn to look beyond the surface, you start to see that fear is often excitement in disguise. It's your body's way of saying, "This matters." The fear growth paradox doesn't mean you should chase every fear blindly. It means you should examine the ones that persist, the ones that follow you, the ones that keep appearing in your dreams, your daydreams, your hesitations. If something scares you and excites you at the same time, it's probably important. That uneasy flutter in your chest, that's the place to explore. Growth is rarely convenient. It never sends a polite invitation. It kicks the door open. It makes you uncomfortable, and in doing so, it invites you to stretch, to rise, to evolve. Every time you move toward fear, something changes inside you. Your confidence grows, your courage deepens. You realize that fear is not fatal, that failure is not the end, that you are far more capable than you imagined. Each small act of bravery compounds. You begin to build trust with yourself, and that self-trust becomes your anchor. It tells you, even in shaky moments, "I can handle this." That voice, soft but steady, is the voice of growth, and it only appears when you face what frightens you. But what happens when you avoid fear? You stay stuck. You shrink. You begin to live within a smaller and smaller circle, avoiding anything that challenges you. And the more you avoid, the more the fear grows. It feeds on retreat. It gets louder the more you obey it. And before long, you're not making choices, you're reacting. You're navigating life based on what feels safe, not what feels right. And this safety comes at a cost. The cost is your expansion, your potential, your aliveness. Because deep growth never happens in the comfort zone, it happens just outside of it. The people who grow the most are not those who feel the least fear. They're the ones who feel it and move anyway. They understand that courage is not the absence of fear, it's action in the face of it. They don't wait for the fear to go away. They understand it may never leave. But they also understand that fear is a poor decision maker that, while it may signal danger, it cannot always tell the difference between threat and growth, and so they choose to act, not recklessly, but intentionally, deliberately, with trembling hands if necessary. And here's the quiet truth. What scares you today may empower you tomorrow. The thing you once avoided may become the thing that defines you. The speech you feared may open doors. The risk you dreaded may change your life. The fear you face today plants the seed of tomorrow's strength. And the more often you face it, the more familiar it becomes. Eventually, you start to look forward to fear, not because you enjoy it, but because you've learned what it means. It means you're getting closer. It means you're not asleep. It means you're alive. There is a kind of freedom that comes from walking through fear. It loosens the grip of doubt. It silences the voice of what if. It creates space. Space to create. Space to love. Space to explore. Space to be fully yourself. And this freedom is not given, it's earned. It's earned through steps taken in uncertainty, through words spoken while your voice shakes, through leaps made with no guarantee. The people who walk freely are those who've walked through fire, not untouched, but unbroken. So, the next time you feel fear rise up, pause. Ask what it's trying to protect. Ask what it's hiding. And then ask yourself, what would happen if I did it anyway? What would happen if I took the leap, made the call, spoke the truth? What might open up on the other side of that fear? Because chances are, what you fear is also what you need. It's the path your future self is quietly pointing toward, and all it takes is one brave moment at a time. In the end, the fear growth paradox is not about being fearless. It's about walking with fear as a companion, not a commander. It's about recognizing that the discomfort you feel is not a sign to stop. It's a sign you're on the right path. Growth always comes with a cost, but it also comes with a gift. And that gift is who you become on the other side. Braver, stronger, more whole, more you. The projection paradox. Sometimes we meet people who irritate us for reasons we can't explain. Their behavior grates against us. Their tone feels off. Something about the way they carry themselves strikes a nerve, and we're not entirely sure why. We say they're arrogant. We say they're needy. We say they're fake, aggressive, cold, or too emotional. But beneath those labels lies a deeper truth we don't always want to admit. The reason that trait bothers us so much might be because it lives inside us too. This is the projection paradox, the unsettling psychological truth that the more you hate a trait in others, the more likely you're avoiding it in yourself. Projection is not a rare thing. It happens quietly, automatically. It's not a conscious choice, but a defense mechanism, an old survival tool designed to keep the ego comfortable. When we can't fully accept something about ourselves, when an impulse, feeling, or trait feels too threatening to admit, we push it away. We exile it from our identity. But it doesn't vanish. It slips into the shadows. And from there, it looks for a mirror. It begins to show up not in our own behavior, but in our perception of others. We start to notice that same trait everywhere, in our friends, in strangers, in loved ones. We see it clearly in them because we cannot bear to see it in ourselves. This is why someone who's deeply insecure might accuse others of being needy. Someone who secretly craves control might despise others who seem controlling. Someone who is suppressing their anger may find themselves constantly irritated by angry people. It's not that those people don't have flaws, it's that we react to them with disproportionate intensity. We feel triggered, even when the situation doesn't warrant it. And that overreaction is a clue, a breadcrumb, a quiet invitation to look inward. Because the strongest emotional reactions often point not to others, but to unacknowledged parts of ourselves. The projection paradox asks us to pause before we judge, before we roll our eyes, before we label someone as annoying, selfish, manipulative, or fake. It asks, what exactly am I reacting to? Why does this behavior bother me so much? Have I ever behaved like this, even in subtle ways? Is there a part of me that's capable of this trait, but I'm unwilling to admit it? These questions are uncomfortable, but they're also liberating. Because once you recognize a projection, you can reclaim it, and in doing so, you reduce its power over you. It's important to understand that projection isn't always about negative traits. Sometimes we project our potential too. We admire someone's creativity, courage, or charisma, and we believe they have something we lack, but often we're seeing in them what exists dormant within us. The only reason we recognize those traits is because they resonate. They reflect something we wish we could embody more fully. And so the projection paradox isn't just about what we reject in others, it's also about what we admire, what we envy, what we unconsciously long to integrate. The darker side of projection tends to show up when we are avoiding self-reflection, when we are too identified with our self-image, and anything that threatens that image feels like an attack. If we see ourselves as the calm one, we might project emotional chaos onto others. If we believe we are generous, we might become hypersensitive to greed. If we pride ourselves on being humble, arrogance in others might trigger us more than it should. In each case, the paradox is at play. The more intensely we react to a trait, the more likely we are dancing around that very same energy within ourselves. This doesn't mean that everyone you dislike is a mirror of you, not exactly. Some people really do behave poorly. Some traits really are destructive. But the key is not what the person is doing, it's how you're reacting. If your reaction is calm, clear, and proportional, then you're likely responding to a real situation. But if your reaction is explosive, obsessive, or emotionally charged beyond reason, it might be projection. And when projection is at play, the external situation is never the full story. The real tension lives within. One of the most disarming truths of the projection paradox is this: the traits we reject in others often represent disowned parts of our own psyche. Carl Jung called them the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have buried, denied, or repressed. Not because they're evil, but because at some point we were taught they were unacceptable. As children, we learn to be good, to be likable, to be approved of. And to achieve that, we learn to hide the messier parts of ourselves, our anger, our pride, our competitiveness, our sensuality, our sadness. But buried emotions do not die. They wait. And often, they return, wearing someone else's face. G. Vasa. Recognizing projection is a courageous act. It requires humility. It requires curiosity. It means asking not just what's wrong with them, but what is this revealing about me? And it means admitting that you are not purely good or purely bad. You are human. You contain contradictions. You are kind and also selfish. You are calm and also reactive. You are wise and also foolish. Owning your shadow doesn't make you worse, it makes you whole. And when you become whole, your triggers lose their edge. Your judgments soften. Your vision clears. The most beautiful part of the projection paradox is this: once you see it, you can heal it. You can begin to reclaim the energy you've scattered onto others. You can forgive the parts of yourself you've disowned. You can stop needing the world to mirror back only what you like and start embracing the full spectrum of your inner life. And this changes everything. Your relationships become more compassionate. Your inner world becomes more spacious. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop judging and start understanding. So, the next time someone rubs you the wrong way, pause, take a breath. Instead of launching into blame or criticism, ask yourself gently, what am I really reacting to? Is this trait something I fear in myself? Is this behavior something I've tried to suppress? Is this discomfort an invitation to grow? The answers might surprise you. They might challenge your self-image, but they will also deepen your self-awareness, and self-awareness is the beginning of freedom. Because when you stop projecting, you start reclaiming. You no longer need the world to carry the weight of your unacknowledged feelings. You no longer see enemies where there are only reflections. You no longer chase validation or flee from criticism. You begin to sit calmly with yourself, shadows and all. And in that calm, you find clarity. You find strength. You find a peace that doesn't depend on how others behave because you've learned to meet yourself honestly. The projection paradox is not an accusation, it's an invitation to meet the parts of yourself that have been hiding behind judgment. An invitation to turn inward, not as a punishment, but as a path to integration. It's a quiet revolution, the shift from blame to responsibility, from resistance to curiosity, from avoidance to embrace. And as you walk this path, you'll find that the people who used to irritate you the most start to lose their power over you because they were never the enemy, they were the mirror. And sometimes, when you've done enough inner work, you'll find that what once triggered you now teaches you. The arrogance you once despised reveals your own buried confidence. The cleanliness you once mocked reminds you of your need for connection. The ambition you once envied inspires you to chase your own dreams. The shadows become teachers, and the world becomes a place of reflection, not rejection. This is the gift of the projection paradox. It turns conflict into clarity. It turns reaction into reflection. And most of all, it turns judgment into growth. It asks you not to shame yourself, but to embrace your wholeness. Because you are not just the parts of you that are easy to love, you are also the parts that need your attention, your care, your understanding. And when you begin to love all of who you are, the world becomes easier to love too. The connection-isolation paradox. We are more connected now than at any other time in human history. We can send messages across oceans in seconds. We can video call a stranger halfway around the world. We can scroll endlessly through curated glimpses into the lives of millions. And yet, beneath this web of constant contact, something strange is happening. A quiet ache, a rising sense of distance, a feeling that despite all this connection, something is missing. Something is hollow. This is the connection-isolation paradox. The unsettling truth that the more digitally connected we become, the more emotionally isolated we seem to feel. We are surrounded by notifications, comments, likes, and streams. Our screens light up with updates and emojis, but our souls remain untouched. We have traded depth for breadth, intimacy for access, We can communicate with dozens at once, but struggle to sit quietly with just one person. We are in constant dialogue, but rarely in true conversation. The presence is virtual, the bond is shallow, and this shallow connection, repeated day after day, begins to wear on us. We feel seen but not known, heard but not understood, connected but not close. Technology was supposed to bring us together, and in many ways it has. Families stay in touch across continents, old friends reconnect, ideas travel faster than ever before. But the tools meant to bridge distance have also created new kinds of gaps. We are always reachable, but rarely reached, always available, but seldom present. And presence is what connection really needs, not just digital access, but emotional attention. Without it, our connections become echoes, noisy, constant, but ultimately empty. The paradox deepens when we realize that the more time we spend online, the less time we spend truly with ourselves. We fill every pause with scrolling, every silence with sound, and in doing so, we avoid the very stillness where connection grows. Because real connection, whether with others or with ourselves, requires presence. It requires space. It requires listening without distraction, without the urge to respond, without the need to perform. And these things are becoming rare, unnatural, even uncomfortable. The more we connect through screens, the more we compare. We see others' lives, curated and filtered, and we measure them against our own quiet, imperfect realities. We assume everyone else is doing better, feeling happier, living fuller lives, and slowly, subtly, this comparison breeds isolation. We begin to withdraw. We feel less understood, less adequate, less seen, and the irony is, while everyone else is posting smiles and highlights, they are often feeling the same emptiness, the same disconnection, the same longing for something real. We mistake visibility for closeness, but just because someone watches your story or likes your post doesn't mean they know your heart. We've built a culture of spectatorship, not intimacy. We are seen but not known, followed but not felt. And this illusion of connection can be more isolating than being alone. Because when you are truly alone, you can confront your solitude. But when you are surrounded by noise, surrounded by updates, surrounded by people who seem close but aren't truly present, you begin to feel lonely in a crowd. And that is a deeper kind of loneliness. Real connection is slow, it's messy, it requires vulnerability. It can't be rushed, and it can't be scaled. It happens in shared silence, in eye contact, in late-night talks that wander and return. It happens when you allow yourself to be fully seen, not edited, not filtered, not posed. And these moments are harder to find in a world that rewards speed, surface, and stimulation. The deeper the digital current flows, the harder it becomes to reach that quiet shore of honest human presence. Even in relationships, the paradox plays out. Couples may sit together, phones in hand, each lost in a different stream of content. Families may share a room, but not a moment. Friends may gather only to scroll through what others are doing elsewhere. The device becomes the companion, the world becomes the priority, and the person next to us becomes background noise. We confuse sharing the same space with sharing the same experience, but they are not the same. Presence is not proximity. Presence is attention, and attention is increasingly rare. The paradox also affects our relationship with ourselves. The more we connect externally, the more we disconnect internally. We lose the ability to sit still, to be quiet, to feel. Every moment of discomfort is filled with distraction, every question avoided with entertainment, and so we drift from our own center. We become strangers to our emotions. We stop asking how we really feel. We lose the art of inner dialogue, and without that self-connection, all other connections begin to suffer. What we long for more than followers, more than attention, is to be known, to be understood, to be met in the places we keep hidden. But to be known, we must first be willing to know, to slow down, to turn toward others and toward ourselves without flinching, without fleeing into the comfort of the screen. We must be willing to feel the awkwardness of silence, the vulnerability of real emotion, the patience of slow unfolding. And this is hard because it asks us to trade convenience for courage, speed for stillness, performance for presence. There is no easy solution to the connection-isolation paradox. The world is not going to slow down. The technology is not going to vanish. But we can make small choices. We can choose depth over breadth. We can put the phone down during dinner. We can look into someone's eyes when they speak. We can ask how someone is and mean it. And when we ask ourselves how we're doing, we can actually pause long enough to hear the answer. Connection begins with intention. It begins when you decide that being present is more important than being entertained. It begins when you value understanding over being right, when you listen not just to reply, but to truly hear, and when you speak not just to fill space, but to reveal something real. These small acts, repeated often, begin to dissolve the paradox. They begin to replace digital noise with emotional clarity. They begin to make others feel safe and seen and valued. And in doing so, they make you feel less alone. We live in an age of networked loneliness, but within that loneliness lies a choice to slow down, to reach out, to go deeper, to be honest about what we really need. Not more likes, but more listening. Not more updates, but more understanding. Not more followers, but more friends. And not more connection for the sake of connection, but connection for the sake of being human, raw, imperfect, present. Because when we peel away the surface, we're all longing for the same thing: to be known without performing, to be loved without pretending, to be held without earning it. And this kind of connection isn't found in the glare of a screen. It's found in the soft moments, the quiet ones, the ones where someone sits with you, not to fix you, not to impress you, but simply to be with you. And in that being, with all the distractions set aside, you feel the paradox begin to soften. You feel the loneliness lift, just a little. Connection is not something you collect. It's something you nurture. It doesn't live in numbers. It lives in presence, in honesty, in depth. And when you remember this, when you choose this, the paradox begins to unravel. You become the kind of person others feel safe around, the kind of person who makes silence feel comforting, not awkward, the kind of person who listens not just with ears, but with the heart. And in doing so, you no longer feel so alone. The relationship independence paradox. Love is often portrayed as merging. Two souls becoming one, two hearts beating in rhythm. The fairy tales and songs tell us that true happiness lies in finding our other half, the missing piece that will finally make us whole. But here's where reality introduces a twist. The strongest relationships aren't built on dependence, but on independence. The more comfortable you are being alone, the more capable you are of forming a lasting bond. This is the relationship independence paradox, the quiet truth that, in order to love fully, you must first learn how to stand alone. We enter relationships hoping to be fulfilled. We want someone to make us feel special, seen, worthy. And while love can indeed bring immense joy, it cannot fix what's broken inside. It cannot fill a void that we have not tended to ourselves. When we come to a relationship incomplete, expecting someone else to complete us, we put too much pressure on the bond. The connection becomes strained under the weight of our unspoken needs, and slowly what was meant to bring joy begins to bring tension, confusion, and loss of self. True intimacy is only possible when two whole individuals choose to come together, not out of need, but out of desire, not to escape loneliness, but to share fullness. When you are happy by yourself, you don't enter a relationship trying to be rescued. You don't demand constant validation. You don't fear silence or space. Instead, you bring your own peace to the table, your own joy, your own grounded sense of self, and that inner stability becomes the foundation for real connection, one that is not built on clinging, but on freedom. Being alone teaches you who you are. It teaches you what you like, what you value, what you need. It teaches you how to soothe yourself, how to motivate yourself, how to live in your own rhythm. These lessons are not luxuries, they are necessities. Without them, you risk losing yourself in someone else. You may begin to compromise your values just to keep the peace. You may shapeshift to avoid conflict. You may grow resentful, not because of the other person, but because you abandoned your own center. And that abandonment always creates distance, even in the closest embrace. People often fear solitude. They see it as a punishment, as a sign that something is wrong. But solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is sacred. It is the place where you meet yourself, where you listen to your own thoughts, free from outside influence, where you nurture the parts of you that long for attention, not from others, but from you. And when you learn to enjoy your own company, you no longer fear being alone. You no longer grasp, you no longer chase. You attract, not from desperation, but from alignment. The paradox is that independence doesn't make you cold, it makes you warm in a deeper, quieter way. It allows you to love without possessing, to care without controlling, to support without sacrificing yourself. And that is the kind of love that endures, because it is not rooted in fear. It is not clinging to the other person for identity, for happiness, for meaning. It is sharing the journey while still walking your own path. Two people, side by side, not tangled, but joined in trust. In a relationship built on independence, space is not a threat. Time apart is not suspicious. Silence is not awkward. There is a deep knowing that love does not require constant closeness. It requires consistency, authenticity, and respect. You don't need to be in each other's arms every moment to feel connected. You don't need to talk constantly to feel secure, because the foundation is not shaken by distance, it is strengthened by it. And this level of peace is only possible when you are at peace with yourself first. People often think being self-sufficient means you don't need anyone, but that's not the point. Independence is not isolation, it's self-responsibility. It's knowing that your emotions, your worth, your direction do not depend on another person's choices. You can invite someone into your life without making them the center of it. You can love deeply without losing yourself in the process. And ironically, this strength is what allows the relationship to flourish, because both people are choosing, not clinging, growing, not grasping. When you're not afraid of being alone, you make better choices in love. You're not looking for someone to fill a gap. You're looking for someone who adds to what you already have. You don't settle for mistreatment because you're not terrified of walking away. You don't ignore red flags because you're not clinging to the first person who shows affection. You hold your standards, you trust your intuition, and in doing so, you create space for real compatibility, not just chemistry, not just comfort, but a deep, lasting alignment of values, pace, and vision. This doesn't mean love becomes transactional or cold. In fact, it becomes more meaningful because every moment shared is chosen. Every conversation, every gesture, every act of care is an offering, not a demand, not an obligation. When you love from a place of inner wholeness, your love becomes a gift, and the relationship becomes a sacred space, not to complete you, but to celebrate you, not to fix your wounds, but to honor your growth. The relationship independence paradox also protects you from codependency. When you rely on someone else to regulate your emotions, to define your worth, or to constantly reassure you, the relationship becomes fragile. Every disagreement feels like a threat. Every moment of distance feels like abandonment. But when you are emotionally self-reliant, you can handle the ups and downs. You can sit with discomfort, you can process without panic, and that emotional maturity becomes a safe space for both you and your partner. Independence also gives you the courage to be honest. When you're not afraid of losing someone, you're more likely to speak your truth, to say what you need, to set boundaries, to express your real thoughts and emotions. And honesty is the lifeblood of intimacy. Without it, you may maintain peace on the surface, but underneath, resentment brews. Real connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability only thrives when you are not performing, not people-pleasing, not pretending to be okay. It thrives when you know who you are and trust that you're enough. The most powerful relationships are not built on perfect compatibility. They are built on mutual respect, clear communication, and the freedom to grow individually and together. That growth only happens when both people have a strong foundation within themselves. When they know their value, when they aren't relying on the relationship to define their identity. In that kind of dynamic, love becomes expansive, supportive, healing, not because there's no conflict, but because the conflict is met with presence, not panic. You can love someone deeply and still need time alone. You can be committed and still prioritize your own path. These are not contradictions. They are signs of a healthy bond. The more fulfilled you are in your solitude, the more you have to offer in your togetherness. You bring your own light. You don't demand someone else be your sun. And when two people bring their own light to the table, the relationship becomes a shared fire, not a desperate flame trying to survive the wind. So, if you're alone right now, don't rush. Don't fill the space out of fear. Let the solitude shape you. Let it show you what matters. Let it teach you to care for yourself in the way you hope a partner someday will. Because you attract at the level of your self-respect. You invite what you believe you deserve. And when you treat your alone time as sacred, you begin to magnetize love that is equally love that sees your independence as a gift, not a threat. The relationship independence paradox is a quiet truth that redefines how we think about love. It reminds us that the best relationships don't consume you, they expand you. They don't make you forget yourself, they help you return to yourself more deeply. The goal is not to merge into one, but to walk side by side, rooted in self, open to other. When you find someone who loves you not because you complete them, but because you complement them, you have found something rare, something real, something worth holding. And it all begins with you. Your wholeness, your independence, your willingness to sit with your own silence, to enjoy your own company, to honor your own heart, even when no one else is watching. Because the truth is, you can only meet someone else as deeply as you've met yourself. And the more you love who you are alone, the more love you'll be able to give and receive when someone joins you on the path. The knowledge paradox. The pursuit of knowledge is a strange thing. We embark on it with the hope of gaining understanding, of unlocking secrets, of becoming wiser. But as we dive deeper into the vast ocean of information, something unexpected happens. Instead of feeling certain and assured, we begin to feel smaller. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. This is the knowledge paradox. The more you discover, the more you realize how little you truly understand. At first, the process of learning is exhilarating. The new facts, the new ideas, the new frameworks, all these pieces of the world begin to come together. The more we know, the more confident we feel. We start to believe that we understand the world, that we can explain it, that we have the answers. But this feeling is temporary. As we dive deeper, we start to uncover the limits of our knowledge. What seemed clear and certain begins to blur. What we thought we knew turns out to be just a small fragment of a much larger, more complex picture. It's as though the more knowledge we gain, the more questions arise. Every answer leads to a new question. Every discovery opens up an even wider realm of the unknown. The more we learn, the more we realize that the more we need to learn. It's as if the universe itself expands with our understanding, stretching out before us, reminding us how much is still beyond our grasp. The deeper we go, the more we see how shallow our previous knowledge truly was. This isn't a failure, it's a natural part of the journey, because true knowledge isn't about collecting facts, it's about recognizing the vastness of what remains unknown. At first, we tend to think that the pursuit of knowledge is linear, that if we just learn enough, we'll eventually reach the summit, where everything will be clear, where all the pieces will fall into place. But in truth, the journey of knowledge is more like an endless spiral. With every new step, we see further, but we also realize just how far we have yet to go. The further we climb, the more the horizon expands, and instead of reaching the end, we find ourselves perpetually in the process of discovery, caught in a dance between knowing and unknowing. There is a profound humility that comes with this realization. The more we learn, the more we become aware of our limitations. We begin to see that our understanding is always partial, always evolving, and always provisional. The confident answers we once held so tightly now seem fragile, as if they might crumble under the weight of deeper inquiry. The knowledge we once thought was certain begins to feel tentative. The more we peel back the layers, the more we uncover the complexity and nuance of the world. And in that complexity, we are reminded of how little we truly know. This paradox isn't just intellectual, it is deeply existential. The more we understand about the world, the more we are confronted with the mystery of existence itself. The more we learn about the vastness of the universe, the intricacies of the human mind, the mysteries of time and space, the more we realize how much we will never understand. We are humbled by the sheer magnitude of the unknown. The more we know, the more we are confronted with the limitations of our own perception, the fragility of our understanding, and the mysteries that lie just beyond our grasp. But there is beauty in this paradox. The awareness of our ignorance isn't a burden, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to continue exploring, to remain curious, to never stop asking questions. It reminds us that knowledge is not something we simply accumulate, but something we constantly engage with. It's not about reaching the end of the journey, but about being present in the process. In a way, the more we learn, the more we are drawn to the pursuit itself. It becomes less about the destination and more about the endless unfolding of discovery. As we deepen our understanding, we begin to see that knowledge isn't static. It isn't a fixed set of facts. It's a dynamic, living process, constantly shifting, constantly evolving. And this is where true wisdom lies. Wisdom isn't found in the answers, but in the questions. It's in the willingness to acknowledge that we don't know everything, and that there is always more to learn. It's in the humility to admit that our knowledge is provisional, that our understanding is limited, and that there will always be more to discover. The knowledge paradox challenges us to embrace uncertainty. It teaches us that certainty is an illusion, that true understanding is always partial, always evolving. The more we try to cling to certainty, the more we close ourselves off to new ideas, new possibilities, and new discoveries. The more we let go of the need for answers, the more open we become to the richness of the unknown. And it is in this openness, this curiosity, that we find the true joy of learning. This paradox also has a profound impact on how we view ourselves. The more we learn, the more we realize that we are not isolated beings with all the answers, but part of a vast, interconnected web of knowledge and experience. We are not solitary islands of understanding, but participants in an ongoing dialogue with the world. Our knowledge is not a possession, it is a shared experience. We are not separate from the world we study, but intrinsically connected to it. This realization brings a sense of humility, a sense of interconnectedness, and a sense of wonder. The knowledge paradox is, in essence, the recognition that we are always in the process of becoming. We are never finished. We are never fully there. And this is not something to lament, it is something to celebrate. It means that life is always unfolding, always full of mystery, always filled with new possibilities. The more we learn, the more we are reminded of how much we have yet to discover, and it is in this endless discovery that we find the depth of life itself. The deeper we go into any field of study, the more we uncover the vast, interconnected network of knowledge that exists beyond it. No subject exists in isolation. No idea is fully understood until we see how it fits into the broader picture. The more we learn, the more we realize that every piece of knowledge is part of a larger puzzle, and that puzzle is always incomplete. And yet, this incompleteness is not a flaw. It is what makes knowledge beautiful. It is what makes life meaningful. We are constantly moving toward understanding, but we never fully arrive. And in this perpetual journey, we find our purpose. So, instead of feeling discouraged by the vastness of what we don't know, we should embrace it. We should celebrate it, because it is in that very gap, the space between what we know and what we don't, that the adventure of knowledge lies. The pursuit of knowledge is not about reaching a final destination, but about engaging in the never-ending process of discovery. The more we learn, the more we realize how much more there is to learn, and this in itself is a gift. The knowledge paradox is not something to fear, it is something to honor. It teaches us that true understanding is always in motion, always evolving. It reminds us that we are all part of a larger story, a story that is still unfolding. The more we learn, the more we realize that there is always more to discover. And in this discovery, we find meaning, we find connection, we find the beauty of a world that is infinitely complex, infinitely mysterious, and infinitely worth exploring. The confidence-ignorance paradox. Confidence is an alluring trait. We're drawn to those who speak with certainty, who answer without hesitation, who move through the world with apparent clarity. There's a magnetic quality to conviction. It makes us feel safe, like the person holding it must know something we don't. But beneath that surface of bold assurance lies a paradox. The more certain someone is that they are right, the more likely it is that they are wrong. This is the confidence-ignorance paradox, the unsettling truth that ignorance often hides behind a mask of certainty, while true knowledge tends to speak softly with humility. It's easy to mistake confidence for competence. We assume that those who speak loudly and decisively must have the facts. We believe that conviction equals understanding. But confidence is not always born from wisdom. In fact, it's often born from not knowing enough to question. The less someone knows about a subject, the simpler it seems. And when something feels simple, certainty comes easily. The world appears black and white. The answers seem obvious. But that illusion of clarity begins to fade as real understanding deepens. When we first encounter a new subject, we often experience what psychologists call the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a cognitive bias in which people with limited knowledge overestimate their understanding. At the early stages of learning, we know just enough to feel confident, but not enough to realize what we're missing. It's a dangerous kind of confidence, because it's not rooted in comprehension, but in illusion. The person caught in this phase may argue passionately, assert their viewpoint without doubt, and dismiss alternative perspectives, not because they truly understand the subject, but because they lack the insight to see its complexity. As we learn more, that early confidence begins to waver. We start to see the gray areas, the contradictions, the exceptions. We realize that most issues are not as simple as they first seemed, and this realization often leads to humility. We speak more carefully. We qualify our statements. We begin to use phrases like, "it depends," or "from what I understand," or "this is just my perspective." To those still caught in the illusion of certainty, this humility may look like weakness, but in truth, it is the mark of maturity. True experts tend to sound less certain, not more. They know how much they don't know. They are aware of the limits of their knowledge. They have seen the layers, the nuances, the history of failed assumptions. They understand that even the most widely accepted truths are subject to revision. And because of this, they carry their knowledge with a kind of quiet caution. They may have answers, but they are not attached to them. They know that wisdom often lies not in having the final word, but in asking better questions. The confidence-ignorance paradox becomes even more dangerous in public discourse. Those who are most certain are often the loudest. And in a world driven by soundbites, headlines, and instant opinions, the loudest voices tend to dominate. Nuance gets drowned out. Complexity is flattened, and the quiet, thoughtful voices, the ones that speak from understanding, are often overlooked. We reward certainty even when it's hollow. We follow boldness even when it leads us in the wrong direction. And in doing so, we perpetuate a culture where confidence matters more than accuracy. There's a deep psychological comfort in certainty. To admit that we might be wrong or that we don't fully understand is uncomfortable. It shakes our sense of stability. So we cling to beliefs, even in the face of contradictory evidence. We become more invested in being right than in finding the truth. And the more invested we are, the more defensive we become. This defensiveness is often mistaken for conviction, but it's really a sign of fragility. When a belief is fragile, it needs to be protected. When a belief is strong, It can withstand questioning. This is why people who are deeply wrong often double down. The louder they insist, the more insecure their understanding may be. They cannot afford to entertain doubt because doubt would unravel the illusion of control. So, they argue, they shout, they repeat themselves. But repetition is not the same as reason, and volume is not the same as truth. The confidence-ignorance paradox is not just about being wrong. It's about being unwilling to examine the possibility that you might be. Humility is the antidote to this paradox. It's the quiet strength that says, I might be wrong, but I'm willing to learn. It's the openness to being corrected, to revising your view, to listening instead of preaching. Humility doesn't mean you have no opinions. It means you hold them lightly. It means you seek understanding more than validation. It means you are more interested in getting it right than being right. And in a world full of noise, this kind of humility is rare and powerful. When someone says, I don't know, it can feel disarming, but it's often the most honest answer because the world is not simple. Truth is rarely absolute. Most ideas are complex, interwoven with context and history and variables. And when we acknowledge that complexity, we open the door to real learning. We stop pretending we have all the answers. We start asking better questions. And slowly, we move from ignorance to insight, not by clinging to certainty, but by releasing it. The confidence-ignorance paradox also invites us to look inward. How often do we speak with confidence just to avoid looking foolish? How often do we pretend to know when we really don't? How often do we hold tightly to a belief, not because it's true, but because it feels safe? These are difficult questions, but they are necessary because self-awareness begins when we stop assuming our views are always correct. It begins when we pause, reflect, and say, maybe I don't know as much as I thought. And in that space of uncertainty, something beautiful happens. Curiosity returns, wonder awakens. We start to see the world not as a collection of facts to conquer, but as a mystery to explore. We become students again, not just of knowledge, but of life. And, in that mindset, every conversation becomes a chance to learn. Every encounter with a different viewpoint becomes a window into another way of seeing. The paradox reminds us that confidence should be earned, not assumed. That certainty should be examined, not celebrated blindly. That wisdom is not found in shouting the loudest, but in listening the deepest. And most of all, it reminds us that being wrong is not a weakness, it's part of the path. Every mistake, every misstep, every mistaken belief, these are stepping stones. They guide us if we let them. They shape us if we're honest about them. So the next time someone seems absolutely sure of themselves, pause. Listen, yes, but ask yourself, is this confidence grounded in understanding or is it masking ignorance? And when you find yourself speaking with great certainty, ask, is this conviction rooted in knowledge or in fear of being wrong? These questions won't always bring easy answers, but they will keep you grounded. They will keep you honest, and they will keep you open to growth. The confidence-ignorance paradox is a mirror. It reflects how we hold our beliefs, how we engage with others, how we navigate the vast and complex world of ideas. It reminds us that true wisdom is quiet, that it walks with doubt, not because it's unsure, but because it's awake. It knows that the truth is not threatened by questions. It knows that every strong belief must be tested, and it knows that every strong belief must be tested. And it knows that the more we learn, the more we realize how much there is still to learn. In the end, confidence is not the enemy, but unearned confidence, confidence without depth, without humility, without inquiry. That is what leads us astray. Real confidence doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to be certain. It is willing to admit when it doesn't know. It is strong enough to listen. And it is humble enough to change. The vulnerability paradox. We spend much of our lives trying to appear strong. We wear masks of competence, of confidence, of composure. We try to seem unfazed, flawless, put together. We polish our words, control our image, and carefully hide the messier parts of ourselves. It's a survival instinct. We think if we show our cracks, we'll be judged. If we reveal our insecurities, we'll be rejected. If we speak our fears, we'll be seen as weak. But reality has a way of surprising us. Because the more honest we are about our faults, the more people tend to admire us. This is the vulnerability paradox. The quiet truth that the more we reveal our imperfections, the more others see us as whole. We think perfection draws people in, but in truth, it's our humanness that does. Our willingness to say, "I don't know." Our ability to admit, "I was wrong." Our capacity to confess, "I'm still figuring this out." These are the moments that open doors, that lower defenses, that create real connection. Because when we show up as we are, we give others permission to do the same. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's disarming honesty. And in a world full of filters and facades, it's one of the most powerful forces we have. There's something magnetic about someone who isn't trying to impress. Someone who can laugh at their mistakes, who can tell their story without editing out the pain. We lean in, not because they seem perfect, but because they seem real. And realness creates trust. You don't trust someone because they never falter. You trust them because they're willing to tell the truth. And truth always carries weight. It resonates at a level that performance never can. We are drawn to vulnerability not because it entertains, but because it reminds us that we're not alone. Many people are terrified of vulnerability. They associate it with exposure, with risk, with giving others something to use against them. And yes, vulnerability carries risk. There is always the chance that someone won't understand, that they'll judge, that they'll distance themselves. But more often, vulnerability creates the opposite effect. It softens people. It opens them. It builds bridges where walls once stood. When someone says, "Here's the truth of who I am," it creates a space of authenticity that no amount of perfection can ever match. The paradox deepens when we realize that the things we try to hide are often the very things that make us relatable. Everyone has insecurities. Everyone has regrets. Everyone has moments of doubt. When you pretend you don't, others may admire your image, but they won't feel close to you. They'll see your mask, not your face. Your act, not your essence. But when you share your real story, when you let the cracks show, others recognize their own reflection in you. And in that recognition, something powerful happens. Connection is born. Not over perfection, but over shared imperfection. There's a quiet kind of confidence in someone who is honest about their flaws. It's not loud. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply says, "This is who I am. Take it or leave it." And that calm self-acceptance is magnetic because it signals something rare. It shows that this person has stopped fighting themselves, that they've stopped trying to curate a perfect image, that they are at peace with their messiness, and they no longer need permission to be human. And paradoxically, this makes them seem stronger, not weaker. more admirable, not less. Vulnerability also builds intimacy. In relationships, it's the foundation of trust. When someone shares their fears, their struggles, their uncertainties, it creates a space for honesty. It says, "You can do the same." It invites real dialogue, not surface talk, but soul-level conversation. Without vulnerability, relationships remain shallow. We walk on eggshells, we hide behind small talk, we avoid the deeper truths. But when someone opens up, it changes everything. The air becomes lighter, the tension dissolves, and the connection becomes something real. We often believe we need to have it all figured out before we're worthy of love or admiration. But it's our openness, not our perfection, that makes us lovable. The friend who says, "I don't know how to deal with this," is often more comforting than the one who gives perfect advice. The partner who says, "I'm scared too," creates more closeness than the one who pretends to be unfazed. The leader who says, "I made a mistake," earns more respect than the one who never admits fault. Because vulnerability is the language of trust. It signals safety. It invites closeness. Even in creativity and leadership, vulnerability shines. The artist who creates from real emotion, the writer who shares their doubts, the speaker who tells the story of their failure before their success. These are the voices we remember because they don't just inform, they move us. They make us feel something, and that feeling is what creates impact. Perfection may impress, but vulnerability touches the heart, and when someone touches your heart, you remember them. Of course, not all vulnerability is created equal. It's not about oversharing or seeking sympathy. It's about sincerity. It's about sharing from a place of grounded truth, not emotional chaos. It's the difference between unloading and unfolding, between using vulnerability to manipulate and offering it to connect. True vulnerability doesn't say, "Look at how broken I am." It says, "I'm human, and so are you." It's not a cry for rescue, it's a bridge toward understanding. The more you embrace your flaws, the less power they have over you. Shame thrives in silence, it grows in the dark. But when you speak the thing you're ashamed of, it begins to shrink, it loses its grip, and you realize others don't think less of you, they think more, because you had the courage to name it, to face it, to own it. And ownership is power. It means you're no longer running from yourself, and when people see that, they trust you more, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. The vulnerability paradox teaches us that what we often think will push people away actually pulls them closer, that the very thing we fear will make us unlovable is the thing that makes us lovable, that our cracks don't ruin us, they reveal us. They show the light inside. And when we let that light shine through, others see it and are drawn to it. Because deep down, we're all just looking for someone who makes us feel okay being ourselves. And when you are unapologetically yourself, you become that person for others. You don't have to pretend to be perfect. You don't have to hide your fears. You don't have to carry the weight of a polished image. You are allowed to be messy, to be confused, to be honest. And in that honesty, you will find strength. In that mess, you will find connection. In that vulnerability, you will find the very thing you thought you had to fake to receive: love, respect, and belonging. So the next time you're tempted to hide your flaws, consider showing them instead. The next time you want to cover up your fear, try sharing it. The next time you feel the urge to pretend you're okay, try admitting that you're not. You might be surprised by the response. You might find that instead of judgment, you receive empathy. Instead of rejection, you receive closeness. Instead of weakness, you are seen as strong, not in spite of your vulnerability, but because of it. The more honest you are about your faults, the more others will trust you. The more real you are, the more others will respect you. And the more you reveal your humanity, the more others will admire your courage. Because in the end, vulnerability is not about falling apart. It's about coming together. It's about breaking the illusion of perfection and finding the beauty in truth. And that truth, spoken gently, owned fully, is what makes you unforgettable. The choice paradox. Choice is often considered the ultimate form of freedom. The ability to choose for yourself, to shape your own path, to decide what you want, when you want it, is celebrated as a cornerstone of modern life. More choices mean more control. More options mean more power. That's the story we're told. But as with many things, reality offers a quieter contradiction. Because the more options we're given, the harder it becomes to choose. And worse, the less satisfied we feel with the choice we eventually make. This is the choice paradox. The strange truth that more options don't always bring more happiness. They often bring more doubt, more second-guessing, and a quieter sense of dissatisfaction. We live in an age of abundance. We scroll through endless menus, catalogs, streaming platforms, dating apps, job listings, and lifestyle possibilities. Every decision, even the smallest, seems to demand more mental energy than it once did. What used to be a simple choice, what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, has now become a mini quest of optimization. We don't just want something good, we want the best deal, the best flavor, the best fit, the best experience. And because of this, we fear making the wrong choice, not because the consequence is severe, but because the regret might linger. When options multiply, so does the pressure. Every decision becomes a reflection of your judgment. Every outcome feels like a statement on your taste, your intelligence, your ability to navigate the world. And so, even after choosing, the mind begins to wander. What if you had gone with the other option? What if you missed something better? What if this wasn't the right one? This constant questioning robs the moment of peace. Instead of enjoying what we chose, we become haunted by what we didn't. This is the paradox. Freedom of choice should make us feel empowered, yet often it leaves us feeling anxious. It should bring joy, yet it brings doubt. It should clarify, yet it confuses. When the possibilities are endless, commitment becomes harder. We hesitate, we delay, we dip our toes into everything, but dive deeply into nothing. And in doing so, we miss the richness that comes from wholehearted choice, from being all in, even when you don't know all the alternative. There's a kind of quiet suffering in too much choice. It creates the illusion that happiness is just one better decision away, that if we just picked differently, we'd be more satisfied. But satisfaction doesn't come from making the perfect choice. It comes from being present with the one you made, from accepting that no option will be flawless, that every path comes with trade-offs, that life doesn't offer certainty. It offers experiences, and those experiences only become meaningful when we commit to them fully, without constantly looking over our shoulder. In relationships, the choice paradox appears in subtle ways. The belief that someone better might be just around the corner keeps people from truly investing in the person in front of them. In careers, the endless scroll of opportunities makes it hard to feel content in any one job. In everyday life, we bounce from option to option, craving novelty, but losing the depth that comes from long-term engagement, and the result is often a vague sense of disconnection, a feeling that nothing quite satisfies, that nothing quite sticks. Simplicity used to be seen as a limitation. Now it's becoming a luxury. Fewer choices can feel like a relief. When you only have a few paths to choose from, you're more likely to commit, to adapt, to find meaning in what is. But when options are limitless, meaning becomes harder to find, because you're always wondering what could have been. The mind starts playing games, imagining parallel versions of your life where the other choice would have made everything better. But this is an illusion, a trap, a fantasy built on the belief that satisfaction lies elsewhere. The truth is, no matter what we choose, the mind will always be capable of imagining a better version, a slightly more exciting opportunity, a slightly more attractive partner, a slightly more successful career. But this tendency doesn't reflect reality, it reflects the mind's inability to be content. The moment you recognize this, something shifts. You realize that happiness isn't about choosing perfectly, it's about choosing mindfully and then letting go of the alternatives. Gratitude is the great healer of the choice paradox. When you focus on what you have rather than what you might have missed, your experience deepens. You stop comparing, you stop fantasizing, you begin to notice the texture, the subtle beauty, the uniqueness of the choice you made. It becomes enough, and in that enoughness, satisfaction blooms. Not because the option was the best in the world, but because you stopped looking for something else. There's wisdom in limitation. When choices are few, presence becomes easier. When the path is narrow, the journey becomes more focused. And with focus comes depth, commitment, clarity. The more deeply you engage with one choice, the more it reveals itself. What once seemed average begins to glow. What once felt uncertain begins to feel sacred. And it's not because the thing changed, it's because your attention did. Of course, some choice is necessary. Freedom matters, agency matters. But too much freedom without direction can become a burden. It can paralyze. It can scatter your energy and dilute your experience. The key is not to eliminate options, but to approach them differently, to choose with intention, to understand that saying yes to one thing means saying no to others. And that's okay. That's part of life. You can't live every version of your story. You can only live the one you choose, and the more fully you live it, the richer it becomes. Choice is not just about selecting an option. It's about surrendering to it, about saying, "This is what I've chosen, and I'm going to live it fully." Not because it's perfect, not because it has no flaws, but because life is not about avoiding regret, it's about making meaning from wherever you land. And meaning doesn't come from the outside, it comes from how you show up, how present you are, how open you are to what unfolds. The choice paradox invites us to reconsider our relationship with decision-making, to shift from chasing the best to embracing the present, to stop seeking the ideal and start engaging with the real. Because the real is where life happens, in the ordinary, in the flawed, in the paths we didn't expect to take, but that took us somewhere beautiful anyway. Sometimes the best decision is not the one that looks best on paper, but the one that aligns with your values, with your rhythm, with your heart. Sometimes it's the option that brings peace, not prestige, the one that feels true, not trendy. And sometimes the key to satisfaction isn't in choosing better, but in choosing once, and then pouring yourself fully into that choice. Life is full of branching paths. You won't always choose wisely. You won't always get it right. But you don't need to, because what matters most isn't that you chose the perfect thing. It's that you chose with awareness, with care, with presence. And then, instead of asking, "What else could I have had?" you ask, "What can I build with what I've chosen?" Satisfaction doesn't live in a catalog of endless options. It lives in the depth of your commitment, in your ability to say, "This is enough. I am here. I choose this." And in that choosing, something shifts. Doubt begins to fade. Regret loses its voice. And clarity, quiet, humble clarity, begins to emerge. This is the paradox. The more choices we have, the harder it is to feel fulfilled. But the moment we stop needing the best and start choosing with intention, we begin to find peace. Not in perfection, but in presence. The relationship control paradox. Love is one of the most powerful forces in life. It draws people together, builds families, shapes destinies. It has the power to heal wounds, soften hearts, and give life meaning. But love, for all its strength, is also delicate. It cannot be caged or coerced. And the more you try to control it, through pressure, force, or fear, the more it begins to slip away. This is the relationship control paradox. The more you force a relationship, the more likely it is to fall apart. Because real connection doesn't grow in control, it grows in freedom, in trust, and in space to simply be. In the beginning of a relationship, everything feels open and full of possibility. There's discovery, curiosity, and the gentle unfolding of two people coming into each other's lives. But when fear enters the picture, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, control often follows. It's subtle at first. A need to know where the other person is, a desire to influence their choices, an unspoken pressure to move faster or stay longer, or love harder. We may tell ourselves it's care, but beneath it is anxiety. And that anxiety begins to push, to shape, to demand. What we often forget is that love is a choice, not an obligation. The moment it feels forced, it begins to weaken. When one person tries to control the pace, the depth, or the behavior of the other, the relationship shifts. It loses its natural rhythm. It becomes tight, tense, and heavy. The freedom that once made love feel alive now begins to vanish. And slowly, both people start to feel the weight of it and feel smothered. The other feels uncertain, and the bond begins to fray, not because the feelings are gone, but because the freedom to feel them has disappeared. Control in relationships often stems from insecurity. When we don't feel secure within ourselves, we look to the other person to make us feel safe. We want them to prove their love, reassure us constantly, or behave in ways that calm our inner storms. But no one can hold that responsibility for long, and the more we expect them to, the more pressure we place on the connection. The relationship begins to shift from a shared space of love to a space of management, a place where one person tries to orchestrate how the other moves, thinks, and feels, sometimes without even realizing it. The paradox is that the more we try to hold on tightly, the more likely we are to lose what we're clinging to. Love doesn't respond well to being gripped. It's not a possession. It's not something to be managed. It's something to be nurtured. And nurturing doesn't require force. It requires trust. It means allowing the other person to be fully themselves, even when it challenges your sense of comfort. It means holding space for their freedom, their thoughts, their emotions, even when they don't align perfectly with your own. Trying to control a relationship also disrupts its natural flow. Every relationship has its own rhythm. It breathes, it stretches, it moves at a pace that can't be forced. When we try to rush it, we miss the moments that build depth. When we try to shape it too soon, we prevent the bond from forming authentically. And when we try to script its outcome, we rob it of its spontaneity. Control replaces presence. It creates tension where there could have been ease, and soon what began as something beautiful begins to feel like a burden. In truth, the healthiest relationships are built not on control, but on trust and mutual respect. Trust that the other person will show up. Trust that the connection is strong enough to weather change. Respect for the other person's individuality. Space to breathe, room to grow, and these things are not signs of emotional distance. They are the ingredients of emotional safety. When someone feels free to be themselves, they are more likely to stay. When they feel pressured to perform or conform, they are more likely to pull away. We often try to control because we fear uncertainty. We want guarantees. We want to know where it's all going. But love doesn't come with guarantees. It requires vulnerability. It asks us to step into the unknown, to open our hearts without knowing how it will end. And that's hard. But it's also where real intimacy is found. You cannot force someone to love you in the way you want. You cannot demand closeness. You cannot script chemistry. What you can do is show up authentically, create space for connection, let the bond grow at its own pace. When you stop trying to control the relationship, something beautiful happens. You begin to listen more, to notice more, to appreciate what's real instead of trying to shape what's not. You let go of expectations and start to see the other person for who they are, not who you want them to be. And in doing so, you create a space where real love can grow, unforced, unhurried, and deeply rooted in truth. The relationship control paradox teaches us that love cannot be built on manipulation, persuasion, or pressure. It asks us to surrender our tight grip, to trust that what is meant to grow will grow, that what is real does not need to be forced, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is simply let go. Not of the person, but of the need to control the outcome. Relationships flourish when there's room to breathe, when both people feel safe being fully themselves, when disagreements don't become threats, when silence doesn't mean disconnection, when space doesn't mean abandonment. That kind of security comes not from control, but from emotional maturity. From two people who can stand independently and choose each other freely, again and again. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Letting go of control doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start trusting. It means you allow the relationship to unfold naturally rather than trying to shape it into something it's not ready to be. It means you're willing to sit with the discomfort of not knowing without rushing to fix it. It means you understand that love is not about holding on, it's about showing up, again and again, with presence, openness, and a willingness to see what unfolds. If you feel the need to control, it's worth asking, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of being alone? Of being hurt? Of not being enough? These fears are valid, but no amount of control can protect you from pain. And ironically, trying to control your way out of heartbreak often leads to the very outcome you were trying to avoid. It creates distance. It erodes trust. It transforms love into obligation. The most powerful relationships are not those without struggle, but those that are allowed to breathe, that are given the freedom to ebb and flow, to change shape, to evolve. The more space you give the relationship to grow organically, the more likely it is to deepen. And the less you try to force it, the more naturally it finds its way into something meaningful and lasting. If you find yourself holding on too tightly, pause. Loosen your grip. Breathe. Remember that love is not a contract, it's a dance. And sometimes the best way to stay close is to stop pulling, to stop pushing, to let the other person step toward you on their own. When they do, it will be real, it will be free, and it will be the kind of love that doesn't need to be forced to be felt. The relationship control paradox reminds us that you cannot control someone into loving you, staying with you, or healing you. All you can do is create the kind of space where love feels safe, where both people feel seen, where choice is honored, and in that space connection can thrive, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. The self-love paradox. Love is often described as an outward act, a giving, a reaching, a devotion to someone else. We're taught to be kind, to be generous, to think of others before ourselves. And while there is beauty in selflessness, there is also danger in forgetting where love begins. It begins within. Because the truth is, you can only pour from a full cup, and until you learn to love yourself, not in ego or vanity, but in quiet respect, you will struggle to love others fully. This is the self-love paradox. The more you're able to love yourself, the more you're able to love others. At first it sounds counterintuitive. We're often told that too much focus on ourselves is selfish, that to love others we must sacrifice, compromise, and put their needs above our own. And yes, love does involve sacrifice. But if that sacrifice comes from emptiness, if it's rooted in guilt, shame, or a need for validation, it becomes something else. It becomes martyrdom. It becomes performance. And over time, it builds resentment, not closeness. True love doesn't grow from self-neglect. It grows from self-respect, from the ability to say, I matter too. When you love yourself, you know your own worth. You stop seeking it in others. You no longer need constant reassurance. You don't rely on someone else to complete you, and this makes your love cleaner, softer, more genuine. You give not to be validated, but because your heart is full. You listen without needing to be heard back. You care without keeping score. You can hold space for someone else's emotions because you've learned how to hold space for your own. Self-love teaches you boundaries. It shows you where your limits are and gives you the courage to honor them. And boundaries are not walls. They are the lines that protect what is sacred. Without them, love becomes distorted. It turns into people-pleasing, into self-erasure. But when you truly care for yourself, you can say no with grace. You can step back when needed. You can communicate your needs clearly without guilt. And this honesty creates safety for you and for those you love. One of the quiet gifts of self-love is that it makes you less reactive. When you are grounded in yourself, you don't take things as personally. You don't get pulled into every emotional storm. You can see others more clearly because you're no longer looking through the lens of your own unmet needs. You can recognize that someone else's anger isn't always about you, that their silence doesn't always signal rejection, that their distance might be their own fear, not a reflection of your worth. And in this space, compassion grows. You stop needing others to behave a certain way to feel okay. You love them where they are, not where you wish they were. Self-love also makes forgiveness possible, not because you tolerate mistreatment, but because you understand your own flaws. You've seen your own messiness, your own shadows, your own regrets, and you've chosen to love yourself anyway. That kind of grace naturally extends outward. You stop expecting perfection in others. You stop holding grudges like weapons. You begin to understand that everyone is doing the best they can with the level of awareness they have. And while you may still set boundaries, you do so with peace, not punishment. The paradox becomes clearer with time. The more you pour into yourself, the more love you have to offer. It's not selfish, it's sustainable. You are your first relationship, and how you treat yourself sets the tone for every other connection in your life. If you speak harshly to yourself, you'll likely judge others more harshly too. If you neglect your needs, you may expect others to fulfill them for you. But if you show up for yourself with kindness, with patience, with understanding, those qualities begin to overflow into your relationships. And suddenly, love stops feeling like a transaction and starts feeling like a presence. Loving yourself doesn't mean thinking you're perfect. It means seeing your imperfections and choosing to be gentle anyway. It means recognizing your patterns and still being patient as you grow. It means holding your own hand through the hard days and not abandoning yourself when you feel unworthy. This inner loyalty is what makes outer love feel safe. Because when you can anchor yourself, you don't need someone else to be your anchor. You become whole on your own, and from that wholeness, you can share love instead of seek it. You begin to show up differently. You listen more deeply. You don't interrupt to defend. You don't need to win every argument. You don't demand love, you offer it. And others feel that shift. They feel the steadiness in your presence, the ease in your company. You no longer approach relationships as a way to be rescued, but as a space to share life, side by side. You stop fearing rejection because your sense of worth is no longer tied to someone else's approval. And this makes your love more courageous, more open, more free. Self-love is not a destination, it's a daily practice. It's in the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening, in the way you feed your body, the way you rest, the way you forgive yourself when you fall short. It's in the choices you make when no one else will ever know, and with every act of inner kindness, you strengthen your ability to love outwardly. Because when you stop waging war on yourself, your heart has more space to hold others. People often fear that loving themselves will make them complacent, but the opposite is true. Self-love is not passive, it's transformative. It motivates you to grow, not out of self-loathing, but out of self-respect. You want to become better because you care for yourself, not because you're trying to fix something broken. And this shift makes growth sustainable, compassionate. It makes change feel like a gift, not a punishment. And this same energy extends outward. You begin to support others in their growth, not with criticism, but with care. Not with pressure, but with presence. The self-love paradox invites us to stop chasing love and start embodying it, to recognize that the most powerful thing we can offer the world is our own healed heart, not perfect, not polished, but present. When you are at peace with yourself, you radiate something that can't be faked, a kind of quiet confidence, a warmth, a gentleness, and people feel it. They trust it. They are drawn to it, not because you're always right, but because you're always real. So if you want to love better, start within. Start by noticing how you speak to yourself, how you show up for yourself, how you respond when you make mistakes. Treat yourself not as a project, but as a person you care about deeply. Make space for rest, for joy, for reflection. Say no when you need to. Ask for help when you're hurting. Celebrate your small wins. Hold yourself through your losses. The more tender you become with yourself, the more tender you can be with the world. Love begins in quiet places, in the privacy of your thoughts, in the stillness of your heart, and from there it expands. The self-love paradox is not about turning inward to escape others. It's about turning inward so you can show up more fully for others. When you are full, you can give without resentment. When you are seen by yourself, you can see others without judgment. When you are held by your own compassion, you can hold others without fear. And so, the journey is not about becoming someone else. It's about coming home to yourself. Not so you can isolate, but so you can connect more deeply. The more you love yourself, the less you need to be loved perfectly by others. And the more space you create for love to be honest, human, and whole. The death-life paradox. We spend much of our lives trying not to think about death. It waits like a shadow at the edge of every room, too quiet to notice, too unsettling to confront, and yet it shapes us more than we know. The fear of death lingers beneath many of our decisions, often masked as anxiety, control, or hesitation. We avoid risks, we stay in our routines, we protect ourselves from discomfort, all because, deep down, we're trying to keep the inevitable at bay. But something strange happens when you begin to face death instead of fleeing it. The more you accept its presence, the more alive you begin to feel. This is the death-life paradox. The quiet truth that the less afraid you are of death, the less afraid you are to live. Most of us are conditioned to treat death as the enemy, as the thing we must delay, defeat, or deny. We fill our days with distractions so we don't have to feel its approach. We speak of death only when necessary, and even then in hushed tones. But avoidance doesn't protect us. It only makes the fear grow in silence. The more we try not to think about death, the more we live with subtle tension, a background noise of dread, and in that state, life begins to shrink. We play it safe. We numb. We settle for the familiar. Because something inside whispers, "Don't get too close to the edge." But death is not something that can be outrun. It is the one thing all of us will meet. It is the great equalizer, the silent reminder that nothing lasts forever. Not our bodies, not our plans, not even our names. And when we finally begin to look at it, not with fear, but with curiosity, our relationship to life begins to change. We start to see time differently. We start to measure our days not in tasks, but in presence. And we begin to ask different questions. What matters? Who do I love? How do I want to spend this brief and beautiful time I've been given? To befriend death is not to invite it. It is to recognize its place in the story. It is to stop pretending we are immune to endings, and, paradoxically, this recognition brings peace. It softens our grip. It reminds us that our days are precious, not promised. And from that awareness grows a different kind of courage. A courage to take chances, to speak from the heart, to forgive, to begin again. When death is no longer a taboo, life becomes less timid. The death-life paradox invites us to stop treating life as a rehearsal. We're always preparing, always waiting. We say we'll live fully when the timing is right, after the next job, the next goal, the next fix. But the truth is, Life is already happening. This moment is it. The clock is always ticking, not to pressure you, but to awaken you. Because when you accept that there are only so many mornings, so many sunsets, so many ordinary Tuesdays, you stop taking them for granted. You begin to feel the weight of time in a sacred way, not as a burden, but as a blessing. When you're no longer afraid of dying, you stop fearing discomfort. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing failure. Because all of those things shrink in comparison to the final curtain. You realize that embarrassment won't kill you, that taking a risk won't end you, that loving someone, even if it doesn't last, is always worth it. And so you begin to live more boldly. You say the thing, you take the leap, you laugh louder, you cry without apology, because suddenly there is no time to waste pretending. Those who have come close to death often describe a profound shift, a deep stillness, a clarity. Many of them say they are no longer afraid, not because they don't value life, but because they've finally tasted its fragility. And from that taste, they stop postponing their joy. They let go of what doesn't matter. They become more honest, more present, more grateful. You don't have to brush against death to feel this shift. You simply have to let yourself remember that your time is not infinite, that you are, in the best way possible, temporary. This doesn't mean living in fear or sorrow. It means living awake, fully, intentionally. It means letting go of the illusion of permanence, and in doing so, falling in love with impermanence. With the way the sky changes color, with the way laughter fills a room and fades, with the way a hug lingers long after the arms have let go. Death teaches us to see what we might otherwise overlook. It teaches us to treasure moments instead of milestones, people instead of personas, presence instead of perfection. You stop needing life to go a certain way to feel fulfilled. You stop chasing endless achievements as proof of worth. You start looking at each day as something finite and sacred. And suddenly the small things become enormous. The sound of rain, the warmth of a blanket, the texture of a voice you love. When you know everything is passing, everything becomes more precious. The less afraid you are of death, the more open you become to life in all its forms, not just the happy or polished parts, but the mess, the grief, the silence, the unknown. You stop resisting change. You stop clinging to certainty, and in that surrender, something tender emerges. You stop needing life to be perfect and start appreciating it for being real, for being fleeting, for being full of beauty that doesn't last. And that's what makes it beautiful. There's a kind of freedom that only comes from accepting the end. It frees you from comparison, from competition, from the need to win every battle. Because when the race has no guaranteed length, you begin to run differently. You run with your heart. You slow down when it matters. You look sideways to see who's running beside you. You notice the flowers on the path instead of just the finish line. You begin to live as if every breath counts because it does. You may begin to live more simply, more meaningfully. You may stop overcommitting. You may stop waiting for permission. You may finally start doing the things that scare you, not because the fear disappears, but because you realize fear is not the real danger. Wasting your life is. Postponing your soul's joy is. Not showing up fully is. That's what death reminds us of, not to fear the end, but to cherish the middle. And so, the death-life paradox is not dark, it's luminous. It illuminates what we've been missing while trying not to look. It softens our hearts and sharpens our presence. It invites us to live, not forever, but deeply, to love not perfectly, but wholeheartedly, to be here not endlessly, but completely. It teaches us that the goal is not to live forever, but to live well, to live now. When death no longer holds you hostage, life becomes yours again, not in theory, but in practice. You begin to notice the tone of your own voice, the way someone's eyes change when they laugh, the way your heart feels when you're honest, even when it's hard. You stop apologizing for being human. You stop pretending there's time for everything. You begin to live like you mean it. You start measuring time differently, not by how much you accomplish, but by how deeply you feel, how present you are, how kind you become. You begin to understand that legacy is not built in monuments, but in moments, in the way you listen, in the way you show up, in the way you love when it's not easy. These are the things that matter when the end is no longer a stranger. So let death remind you not to be afraid, but to be free, to let go of what weighs you down, to forgive, to begin again, to risk the conversation, to take the trip, to dance in the kitchen, to speak your truth, to live not as if you'll live forever, but as if today matters, because it does. The certainty paradox. We are wired to seek certainty. From the moment we wake to the moment we sleep, our minds search for patterns, answers, assurances. We crave stability. We want to know what's coming next. We want to feel like we're in control. And yet, the longer we live, the more we begin to realize something uncomfortable. Certainty is a myth. The ground beneath us is never as solid as it seems. Plans change. People leave. Life evolves. And the more we try to cling to control, the more it slips through our fingers. This is the certainty paradox. The only certainty is uncertainty. There's something deeply unsettling about not knowing. Uncertainty triggers the mind. It creates restlessness. It stirs the imagination into spirals of what-ifs and maybes. We tell ourselves stories to fill in the blanks. We chase answers to calm the nerves. We try to make life behave according to our expectations. But life doesn't follow a script. It unfolds on its own terms. And the more we try to predict it, the more we suffer when it refuses to be predicted. The paradox lies in the fact that we spend so much energy trying to avoid what is simply inevitable: change, surprise, disruption. Uncertainty is not a glitch in the system, it is the system. The world is not fixed. It moves, it shifts, it breaks and rebuilds. And when we begin to accept this, something softens inside us. We begin to loosen our grip. We begin to trust not in outcomes, but in our ability to meet them. We begin to understand that life isn't about certainty, it's about capacity. The capacity to adapt, to breathe through the unknown, to stand still in the middle of what we can't control. We often believe that certainty brings peace, but more often it brings rigidity. It keeps us locked into expectations. It makes us brittle. So when life veers off course, and it always does, we break instead of bend. We resist instead of flow. We panic instead of pivot. But the peace we're looking for doesn't come from knowing what will happen. It comes from being okay even when we don't. It comes from finding stillness within, not guarantees outside. Think of a river. It never flows the same way twice. It twists, it turns, it adapts to the shape of the land. It keeps moving forward, even when the path is unclear. That's how we're meant to live, not fixed, not frozen, but fluid. Able to meet each moment as it comes, not because we knew it was coming, but because we trust that we'll be able to move with it. When we live this way, uncertainty stops being a threat, it becomes a teacher. The need for certainty often shows up in subtle ways, in overplanning, in perfectionism, in the constant search for validation. We try to forecast every possible outcome, to prepare for every possible disaster, but in doing so, we stop living. We stop listening, we stop being present, because all our attention is focused on controlling the future instead of experiencing the now. And the now is the only place where life is actually happening. Uncertainty is not something to be solved, it's something to be befriended. When you sit with it, instead of fighting it, you begin to hear what it has to say. You begin to notice how much of life is shaped by mystery. How many beautiful moments came from plans that failed. How many turning points began with uncertainty. The most meaningful relationships, the greatest insights, the moments that changed everything, they all began in the unknown. We think certainty will make us feel safe, but true safety comes from within. It comes from knowing who you are when the external world shifts. It comes from trusting your values, your resilience, your center. When you know how to return to yourself, you don't need the world to be predictable. You don't need all the answers, you just need the next step. And sometimes, that step is just a breath, just a pause, just the decision to stay open. The certainty paradox invites us to live differently, to stop chasing guarantees, to stop waiting for everything to make perfect sense, to move forward even when the path isn't clear. Because clarity often comes from movement, not the other way around. You don't need to see the whole road to take the first step. You don't need to have all the answers to begin. You just need to show up. To keep going, to keep listening. Some of the most freeing moments in life come when we admit, I don't know. There's something powerful in surrendering the illusion of control, in saying, I'll figure it out as I go. Because that's what we're all doing. No one has it all mapped out. No one is immune to the unexpected. And the more we can accept that, the more compassionate we become toward ourselves and toward others. We stop pretending. We start relating. We stop judging the mess and start honoring the effort. In relationships, the need for certainty can be suffocating. We want to know how things will turn out. Will they stay? Will this last? Will it end in pain? But love doesn't come with a forecast. It's not a contract, it's a moment-by-moment choice. When we let go of trying to guarantee the future, we make room for deeper connection in the present. We stop clinging, we start cherishing, we stop demanding answers. We start listening to what's real, right here, right now. The same is true for purpose, for meaning. We think we need to have our lives figured out. We think there's a grand answer waiting, and we just haven't found it yet. But maybe meaning isn't something you find once. Maybe it's something you create again and again, through presence, through choice, through staying open to what unfolds. Maybe the real purpose of life is not to reach a fixed destination, but to live deeply along the way. Uncertainty is not an obstacle, it's a portal, a space where growth happens, where identity shifts, where possibilities begin. It's the edge of the known and the beginning of the new. And while standing on that edge can feel terrifying, it can also feel alive. Because in uncertainty, you are not trapped. You are free. Free to imagine, to explore, to become. Letting go of the need for certainty doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start trusting the process, trusting yourself, trusting that even in the fog, something sacred is guiding you forward. And that guidance doesn't always come in clear signs. It often comes in quiet nudges, in intuition, in trial and error, in the courage to keep going without knowing. There is no map that covers every twist and turn of life. There is no plan that protects you from every loss. But there is wisdom in surrender. There is strength in flexibility. There is grace in not knowing. And there is immense peace in finally realizing that certainty was never the goal. Presence was. So let the future unfold as it will. Let yourself be surprised. Let yourself not have it all figured out. Be curious, be kind, be open. The certainty paradox reminds us that life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be experienced. And when you stop demanding certainty, you begin to feel something else. Not safety in prediction, but freedom in presence. Not control over life, but a deeper intimacy with it. And that is where the peace lives. Not in knowing, but in being. Not in answers, but in awareness. Not in certainty, but in trust. The change paradox. We seek stability. We long for certainty. We hold on to the familiar, hoping it will keep us safe. But deep down we know nothing stays the same. Seasons shift. People evolve. Feelings come and go like weather passing through the soul. The world itself is in constant motion, from the turning of the planets to the beating of our hearts. This is the change paradox. The only constant in life is the more we try to resist it, the more we suffer. But when we learn to flow with it, something inside us begins to soften. We begin to live not in fear of the changing tides, but in rhythm with them. We often treat change as an interruption, something that knocks us off course, disturbs our peace, or ruins our plans. But change isn't the exception, it's the rule. It is not what happens when life goes wrong, it is life. And yet we cling. We cling to people, to routines, to roles, to identities we've outgrown. We convince ourselves that if we just hold still long enough, the chaos will pass and we can return to how things were, but there is no going back. The past is not a place we can revisit. It is a story that's already been written. The only way is forward. The only path is through. There is comfort in sameness, in knowing what to expect, in patterns that repeat. But life is not a straight line. It's a spiral, a dance, a series of openings and closings, of birth and decay. And when we forget this, we suffer. We mistake impermanence for loss. We treat transitions as failures. We believe endings mean something went wrong. But often, they mean something is unfolding exactly as it must. Change is not here to punish us. It is here to shape us, to stretch us, to remind us that we are not fixed beings, but ever unfolding. Even our bodies tell the story of change. Cells dying and renewing, skin aging, hair graying. Nothing in us is static. Not our minds, not our dreams, not even our pain. Everything is moving. Everything is becoming, and when we stop trying to freeze time, we begin to feel the beauty in this flow. We stop mourning what is no longer. We stop fearing what is to come. We begin to rest in the present, because we know that whatever it holds, it won't last forever. And somehow, that truth brings both sadness and serenity. We fear change because it reminds us that we're not in control. But control was always an illusion. Life was never ours to manage, it was ours to experience. And the more we try to control, the more we miss. We miss the spontaneous laughter, the unexpected detours, the unplanned joys. We miss the moments of grace that only arrive when we let go. Change doesn't ask us to be ready, it asks us to be present, to stay open, to trust that we will find our way even when the map has disappeared. Some changes arrive slowly, like the turning of a season. Others crash in without warning. A conversation that shifts everything, a loss that rearranges your world, a decision that leads you down a new path. We can't always choose the timing, we can't always understand the meaning, but we can choose how we move through it, with resistance or with grace, with fear or with curiosity, with clenched fists or with an open heart. The change paradox invites us to see endings not as failures, but as thresholds, to recognize that every time something falls away, something else is being born. Maybe it's clarity, maybe it's resilience, maybe it's a version of you that you hadn't yet met. Change is not the end of the story, it is the turning of the page. And the more willing we are to turn, the more fully we can live. Often, the changes we resist most are the ones that lead to our greatest growth. The job that ends and reveals your real calling, the relationship that dissolves and gives you back to yourself, the chapter that closes so that something truer can begin. We don't always understand these changes in the moment. We grieve, we struggle, we search for meaning, but in time, we look back and see what we couldn't see before. That the change didn't destroy us. It revealed us. It refined us. It brought us closer to our own depth. There is wisdom in learning to let go, to release what no longer serves, to say goodbye with grace, even when it hurts. Letting go is not weakness, it is strength. It is the courage to accept reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. And from that acceptance, peace begins to grow. We stop trying to force life into shapes it no longer fits. We allow ourselves to evolve. We allow others to evolve. We allow the world to move without taking its movement personally. There is also great power in beginning again, in waking up to the truth that nothing is permanent, and that's what makes it sacred. Each morning is a chance to become new. Each breath is a reminder that you are still here, still changing, still becoming. Change gives us permission to reinvent, to shed what no longer feels true, to explore paths we once feared. It reminds us that nothing is fixed, not our mistakes, not our stories, not even our identity. We are fluid, and in that fluidity, we find freedom. When we embrace change, we become more compassionate. We stop judging others for their shifts. We stop expecting them to stay the same. We begin to understand that everyone is growing, grieving, transforming in their own way. That behind every change is a silent battle, a private breakthrough, a quiet evolution. And this understanding deepens our empathy. It softens our relationships. It makes space for people to be in transition, just as we are. There is a kind of peace that comes when we stop fearing change and start flowing with it. We begin to live with a light touch. We hold people with more tenderness. We hold plans with more flexibility. We hold ourselves with more compassion. And in doing so, we stop resisting life. We start participating in it. Not just when it feels stable, but when it feels uncertain. The change paradox isn't meant to unsettle you. It's meant to awaken you, to remind you that everything you fear losing was never meant to be permanent, that everything you're afraid to face is already unfolding, and that the only real choice you have is how open you're willing to be, how present, how brave. Not in spite of change, but because of it. Let change find you ready. Let it strip away what no longer fits. Let it surprise you, teach you, break you open. Let it remind you that your story is still being written, that you are still in motion, still in bloom, still becoming something beautiful. Not in spite of change, but because of it. Because the only constant in this life is that nothing stays the same, and once you make peace with that, you stop holding your breath. You start living with your whole heart. The control paradox. Control is comforting, at least it feels that way. We organize, we plan, we predict, we try to steer the future by tightening our grip on the present. We believe that if we manage everything just right, we can avoid pain, dodge uncertainty, and shape life to match our expectations. But somewhere along the way, that grip begins to backfire. The more we try to control every detail, every outcome, every twist in the story, the more chaotic life starts to feel. This is the control paradox. The more you try to control everything, the more out of control you feel. There's a certain appeal to being in control. It makes the world feel safer, more predictable, more manageable. When we can schedule, forecast, and plan with precision, we feel like we've created a protective shield. But life doesn't follow blueprints. It doesn't move according to our timelines. It unfolds in its own mysterious rhythm, often in ways we couldn't have foreseen, and when reality refuses to match our expectations, our sense of peace collapses. The tighter our grip, the more pressure we feel. The more pressure we feel, the more we overcorrect. And the more we overcorrect, the further we drift from peace. Micromanaging life might seem productive on the surface, but beneath it often lies fear. Fear of being caught off guard, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. And so, we compensate by controlling our surroundings. We plan every hour. We overanalyze every word. We obsess over outcomes. But instead of creating ease, we create tension. Instead of calm, we feel constriction. And eventually we come to a quiet realization. Control was never the solution. It was the symptom. What we truly want isn't control, it's clarity. It's peace. It's trust. But these things don't come from dominating our environment. They come from relaxing into it, from learning how to move with life instead of against it, from understanding that we can be prepared without being obsessive, responsible without being rigid. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means recognizing that our power lies not in controlling every variable, but in how we respond to the ones we cannot control. There is a deeper intelligence to life, something we can't always see in the moment. We've all had times when something didn't go our way, only to look back later and see that it was exactly what needed to happen. The job that slipped away made space for something better. The plan that fell apart revealed a deeper truth. The detour became the turning point. But when we're locked into control, we miss these gifts. We're so focused on making life behave that we forget how to truly experience it. When we loosen our grip, something shifts. Space returns, perspective returns. We begin to see that we don't have to force every outcome. We don't have to hold the reins so tightly. Life has its own flow, and when we step back just enough to let that flow move through us, things often begin to align in ways we couldn't have engineered ourselves. We begin to trust not blindly, but intuitively. We start to listen, not to our fears, but to our inner wisdom. Control often disguises itself as responsibility. We tell ourselves we're just being careful, just being proactive, but when we cross the line into obsession, we lose our center. We stop responding and start reacting. We become tense, closed, disconnected, and the people around us can feel it too. Relationships suffer, communication breaks down, the energy becomes heavy. Because control doesn't just affect us, it radiates, and when we finally take a breath and soften, others soften too. Letting go doesn't mean being careless, it means being clear about what's yours to carry and what isn't. It means showing up with intention but not attachment, doing your part but releasing the rest. It means understanding that some things are in your hands, but not everything is, and the peace comes in knowing the difference. When we surrender the need to control what's uncontrollable, we reclaim the energy we lost trying to manage what was never ours to begin with. You can't control how someone feels. You can't control when the next opportunity arrives. You can't control the timing of healing, the outcomes of effort, or the direction of every twist in the road. But you can control how present you are, how kind, how grounded. You can control your breath, your attention, your attitude. And often, that's more than enough, because when you focus on what you can truly influence, yourself, everything else begins to settle. The paradox continues to reveal itself the more we pay attention. When we try to control conversations, they become strained. But when we listen openly, connection deepens. When we try to control time, we feel rushed. But when we embrace the moment, we feel spacious. When we try to control people, they pull away. But when we give them freedom, they often draw closer. Life is not a machine to be operated, it is a mystery to be experienced. Trust is the opposite of control. It is the belief that even if things don't go exactly how we planned, we'll still be okay. It is the quiet confidence that life has rhythms beyond our understanding, and that our role is not to command them, but to dance with them. Trust doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we stop trying to force. And this shift, from forcing to flowing, there is a moment in every storm when we realize we cannot stop the wind, and in that moment we have two choices: keep fighting or surrender. Not in defeat, but in wisdom, in grace, in the understanding that letting go is not weakness, it's alignment. It's saying, I will do what I can and I will release the rest. And in that space of release, life often meets us with unexpected clarity, with resolution we couldn't have planned, with healing we didn't see coming. The more we let go of control, the more control we actually feel, because we're no longer battling the current, we're moving with it. We're grounded not in certainty but in trust. We're rooted not in force, but in presence. And presence is where real power lives. It's not in the ability to predict everything, it's in the capacity to meet whatever comes. The control paradox invites us to live with open hands, to make room for mystery, to replace anxiety with awareness, to meet life with curiosity instead of a checklist, and to remember that clarity does not come from controlling the chaos, but from finding stillness within it, from breathing into uncertainty, from embracing the unknown not as a threat, but as a space of possibility. You don't have to hold it all. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to have all the answers. You are allowed to rest, to pause, to say, I don't know, but I trust I'll find my way. You are allowed to release the grip, not because things will fall apart, but because that's how they fall into place. Loosening control doesn't mean chaos. It means making space for life to surprise you, support you, teach you something new. So take the breath, drop the shoulders, let the tension melt if only a little. Know that you're allowed to move through life with soft hands, with steady steps, with an open heart. Let life be what it is. Let people be who they are. Let outcomes be what they'll be. And meet it all, not with control, but with presence. Because the more you try to control everything, the more out of control you feel. But the more you allow life to unfold, the more you begin to see that peace was never in the planning, it was always in the surrender. The effortless effort paradox. We live in a world that praises effort. Work harder, move faster, push through, don't stop. The idea of effort is deeply embedded in our culture, our language, and our sense of self-worth. So when it comes to peace, to stillness, to relaxation, we bring the same mindset. We try to relax. We put effort into letting go. But the more we try, the further it slips away. The more we chase calm, the more restless we feel. The more we force ourselves to be still, the more agitated we become. This is the effortless effort paradox. The harder you try to relax, the more tense you become. Real peace doesn't arrive through striving. It shows up when you stop chasing and start allowing. There's something almost humorous about the way we pursue relaxation. We download meditation apps, we schedule time to unwind, we read books on mindfulness. And while these things can be helpful, the mindset behind them often creates more stress than serenity. We approach stillness like a task, something to be achieved. We sit down to meditate, and if we're not instantly calm, we feel like we're doing it wrong. We light candles, lower the lights, take a deep breath, and then silently wonder why our thoughts are still racing. We try to escape tension with strategy, but peace is not a strategy, it's a state of being. Trying too hard to relax is like trying to fall asleep by focusing on sleep itself. The effort pulls you away from the very thing you want. Because real ease is not the result of force, it's the absence of it. It's what arises naturally when the need to achieve dissolves. When you stop managing every breath. When you stop trying to silence your mind. When you stop turning rest into another item on the to-do list. Peace arrives when you step back, not when you push forward. It lives in the spaces you stop filling. The paradox is that effort creates resistance. Every time we try to bend our experience into what we think it should be, we create friction. We divide the moment. We split ourselves between where we are and where we think we should be, and that split is what creates tension. The mind whispers, "I should feel calm by now," and suddenly, calm becomes another goal you haven't reached. You become the observer of your own failure to relax, and the more you notice how tense you are, the tenser you become. True relaxation happens when you stop negotiating with the moment, when you stop needing it to be different. It doesn't begin when your breath is perfectly paced or your thoughts have disappeared. It begins when you stop fighting what's happening inside you, when you allow your discomfort to be there without resistance, when you feel the tightness, the racing thoughts, the urge to fix it, and choose not to act on them, not because you've given up, but because you've given in to what is, as it is. That surrender is where the ease begins. There's a subtle, sacred difference between trying to relax and allowing yourself to relax. One is fueled by tension, the other is rooted in trust. Trying to relax says, "This moment isn't enough." Allowing says, "This moment is okay." Trying is about control. Allowing is about openness. And openness is where peace begins. The effortless effort paradox shows up not just in stillness, but in every area of life where surrender matters. Think of creativity. The more you try to be inspired, the more blocked you feel. But when you stop chasing ideas, they appear. Think of love. The more you force connection, the more distant it becomes. But when you let go and show up authentically, intimacy begins to grow. Think of happiness. The more you try to feel good, the more dissatisfied you become. But when you stop resisting sadness, joy finds its way in. Peace isn't manufactured, it's revealed. And the less you force it, the more it flows. We are conditioned to believe that anything worth having must be earned, that effort is always the answer. But some things can't be earned, they can only be allowed. Peace, rest, presence. These are not medals to be won, they are states of awareness that appear when we step aside. When we stop trying to perfect the moment and instead learn how to receive it. This doesn't mean you abandon all structure. It doesn't mean you never plan, or breathe deeply, or create space for stillness. It means you change your relationship with effort, that instead of using force to escape discomfort, you meet it with softness. Instead of trying to get somewhere better, you sit with where you are, and often that sitting becomes the shift. Not because you did anything special, but because you stopped trying to be somewhere else. Trying to relax is often rooted in judgment. We believe we shouldn't be anxious, that we should be over it by now, that we shouldn't feel the way we do. And so we try to relax not out of care but out of shame, out of impatience. But healing doesn't respond to force. The nervous system doesn't unwind because you demand it. It softens when it feels safe. And safety comes not from control, but from compassion. Allow yourself to feel tense without rushing to fix it. Allow your thoughts to move without labeling them as problems. Allow your breath to rise and fall without needing to perfect it. Notice, witness, let it be. And in that letting be, you'll often find that the pressure begins to dissolve. Like mist under the morning sun, it fades, not because you chased it away, but because you stopped clinging to it. There's a kind of wisdom in letting go, a knowing that you don't have to control every part of your inner world, that your body knows how to return to balance, that your mind knows how to settle when given time and space, that your soul doesn't need fixing, it needs listening. And listening happens in stillness. Not in stillness that's forced, but in stillness that's invited. Trying too hard to be peaceful can be like clenching your fist to hold water. The tighter you squeeze, the more you lose. But when you open your hand, the water rests there, gently. The same is true with ease. It doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to permission. The permission to stop trying, the permission to feel what you feel, the permission to rest, even when things aren't resolved. That's where the calm lives, not in the resolution, but in the release. The paradox teaches us something deeper, that true peace is not something you do, it's something you allow. It's not an achievement, it's an arrival. And arrival can only happen when you stop running. When you stop trying to make the moment into something else, when you stop striving to be someone you're not. Effortless effort isn't laziness, it's presence without pressure. Intention without tension. Action without obsession. It's the sacred middle between pushing and giving up. You don't need to force yourself into peace. You only need to remember that peace is your natural state, underneath the noise, the effort, the expectation. It's not something you add to your life, it's something you return to when you remove the need to control every feeling, every thought, every breath. Let it be messy, let it be incomplete, let yourself be enough even when you don't feel calm. and you may just find that the calm starts to rise on its own. So breathe, not because it's a task, but because it's a gift. Rest, not because you earned it, but because you're allowed to. Let the moment be enough, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Let go, not because you're giving up, but because you're finally giving in. Because the harder you try to relax, the more tense you become, and the moment you stop trying to feel peace, you begin to feel it. The attention paradox. We all want to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be known. There's something deeply human about the desire for attention, not in a superficial sense, but in a quiet longing to matter. To have someone look at you and say, "I see you, I hear you, you're real to me." It's not wrong to want attention, it's natural. But in our modern world, the ways we chase it have grown louder, more desperate, more performant. We post, we pose, we scroll, we craft our image, refine our words, and curate our lives for the gaze of others. And the more we chase that gaze, the more hollow it starts to feel. This is the attention paradox. The more you chase attention, the less meaningful attention you receive. Craving validation can be a subtle hunger. It doesn't always scream, sometimes it whispers. A carefully timed post, a flattering story, a small exaggeration in a conversation to win someone's admiration. At first, it feels good. A like, a compliment, a spark of acknowledgement, but that feeling fades quickly, and then the mind begins to crave more. The attention becomes addictive, but never fulfilling. The more you get, the more you need, and slowly, without realizing it, your sense of self begins to shift, not shaped by truth, but by performance. When your worth is tied to how much attention you receive, you're never truly at rest. You're always performing, always wondering how you're being perceived, always measuring yourself through the eyes of others. And the irony is, the more energy you put into being noticed, the more you begin to repel the very thing you seek. Because people can feel it. When you're trying too hard, when you're not at ease in your own skin, that neediness carries weight, and that weight creates distance. Not because people don't care, but because authenticity always speaks louder than presentation. The truth is, we're drawn to people who are at peace with themselves, people who aren't trying to be liked, but who are simply being. There's a kind of magnetic power in someone who doesn't need approval to feel whole, someone who speaks honestly, even when it's not popular, someone who listens more than they impress, someone who shares not to gain attention, but to express something real. These people don't need to chase validation because they already validate themselves. And in that self-assurance, others feel safe. Others feel drawn in. We think that by being louder, we'll be heard. But often, it's the quietest people, the ones who aren't pushing, performing, or proving, who are truly listened to. Because they speak from presence, not pressure. From clarity, not craving. They don't try to capture attention, they carry an energy that makes others pay attention without needing to. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. And presence comes when you no longer need attention to confirm your worth. The more you try to control how others see you, the more disconnected you become from who you really are. You start shaping your personality to fit the room. You adjust your opinions to avoid disapproval. You hide the parts of yourself you fear won't be accepted. But in doing so, you lose something. You lose authenticity. You lose your center. And the people who are drawn to the version of you that you project aren't really seeing you. They're seeing a character, a mask, a mirror of their expectations. And so the connection you build is shallow, fragile, easily broken. But when you stop chasing attention, something changes. You begin to relax. You begin to speak more slowly, more truthfully. You begin to listen, not to respond, but to understand. You begin to show up, not to be impressive, but to be present. And slowly, you begin to attract a different kind of attention, not the fleeting kind that fades after a few seconds, not the surface-level kind that depends on what you say or what you wear, but the deeper kind, the kind that comes from resonance, from truth, meeting truth. The attention paradox teaches us that real connection can't be forced, it must be allowed, and allowing begins with being honest, being imperfect, being unafraid to be quiet, to be still, to be overlooked for a moment without panicking. Because when you're not dependent on external validation, you become more solid inside. You become rooted in your own presence, and from that root, your light begins to shine. Not because you're reaching, but because you're resting. This paradox also reveals something deeper about attention itself. What we truly crave is not attention, it's understanding. It's being known. It's being felt beyond the words we say or the image we present. And that kind of attention can only be received when we're being ourselves, fully. Not filtered, not calculated, just real. When someone sees you in your truth and still chooses to stay, that's the kind of attention that heals, that grounds, that satisfies. But to receive that kind of attention, you have to stop chasing the other kind, the fast kind, the easy kind, the approval you earn by bending, by shaping, by selling a version of yourself. You have to be willing to go unseen for a while, to be quiet in a noisy world, to be real in a world of filters. And that's not always easy, but it's worth it, because what you attract in that space is true. And what's true will always last longer than what. You don't need everyone to notice you. You don't need to be liked by all. You don't need to keep up, speak louder, or sparkle more. You just need to come home to yourself, to rest in your own presence, to value your own attention. Because when you pay attention to yourself, not in vanity, but in awareness, you stop needing it from others. You stop performing. You start living. There is a kind of peace in not needing to be seen, in letting your energy speak for you, in letting your silence say more than your performance ever could. There's a quiet confidence in someone who doesn't chase attention, because they know who they are without it. And that confidence, soft, unshakable, draws people in without trying to. So if you find yourself craving attention, pause. Ask what part of you feels unseen, what part of you is aching for acknowledgement, and instead of reaching outward, turn inward. Hold space for that part. See yourself first. Approve of yourself first. Be with yourself in the way you wish others would be. And from that place, let your energy move. Let your truth unfold. Let your light shine, not to be admired, but because it's who you are. You are not here to impress. You are here to express. You are not here to chase love. You are here to become love. You are not here to be the loudest voice in the room. You are here to speak with clarity, with truth, with heart. And when you live from that space, attention becomes irrelevant, because you're no longer dependent on it. You are nourished from within. The attention paradox reminds us that what we truly seek is never found in performance. It's found in presence. That the most meaningful connections begin when we stop performing and start being. That real attention isn't something you earn, it's something that flows to authenticity. It flows to those who are honest enough to not need it. Let yourself be seen, not through effort, but through presence. Let yourself be known, not by many, but by the few who truly matter. Let yourself be loved, not for who you pretend to be, but for who you are when no one is watching. Because the more you chase attention, the more distant it feels. But the moment you stop needing it, you realize your presence was enough all along. The letting go paradox. We're taught to avoid pain. From an early age, we learn to flinch from discomfort, to escape it, to numb it, to push it down and keep moving. If something hurts, we turn away. If something feels heavy, we distract ourselves. We crave comfort, safety, ease. We chase freedom, imagining it as the absence of pain. But somewhere along the way, we begin to notice a deeper truth, one that doesn't fit neatly into the story we've been told, that the more we run from discomfort, the more it seems to follow us. The more we avoid pain, the more trapped we feel by it. This is the letting go paradox. You only gain true freedom when you stop trying to escape discomfort. Pain is not the enemy. Discomfort is not a sign that something's wrong. Often, it's a signal, a messenger, a doorway. It shows up not to punish us, but to reveal something, a wound that needs care, a story that needs revisiting, a truth that's been avoided for too long. But instead of listening, we resist. We clench. We look for the nearest exit. We convince ourselves that freedom lies on the other side of avoidance. But all that avoidance does is strengthen the very thing we're trying to escape. When you run from pain, you keep it alive. You feed it with fear. You give it power it doesn't deserve. And the more you fight it, the more entangled you become. Like quicksand, the more you struggle, the deeper you sink. But something changes when you stop resisting. When you turn toward the discomfort, not with judgment, but with curiosity. When you say, "Okay, I see you. Let's sit for a while." That's when the grip begins to loosen, not because the pain disappears instantly, but because your relationship to it changes. We spend so much time trying to control our inner world. We want only light, never shadow. Only peace, never chaos. Only happiness, never grief. But the human experience doesn't work that way. It's not clean. It's not linear. It's not made of neatly arranged emotions. It's messy, layered, paradoxical. And the sooner we allow ourselves to feel all of it, not just the comfortable parts, the sooner we begin to feel whole. Letting go isn't about forgetting. It's not about pretending you're fine. It's not about forcing positivity onto a broken moment. It's about surrendering to the reality of what is, letting the moment be exactly what it is without trying to reshape it. It's about softening into the discomfort instead of bracing against it. And in that softening, something surprising happens. You begin to feel lighter, not because the pain is gone, but because you've stopped carrying the weight of resistance. There is profound freedom in meeting discomfort with openness. In saying, "I don't need this to feel good right now. I just need to feel it." When you give yourself that permission, you create space. Space for breath. Space for healing. Space for peace. Not because the pain vanished, but because it was finally given room to move. Emotions like weather need room to pass through, and they do pass when you let them, when you stop locking them away in the dark. The paradox of letting go is that it's not about effort, it's about allowing. It's not a battle to win, it's a doorway to walk through. You don't need to force it, you don't need to rush it, you just need to be with it. Whatever it is. Sadness, anger, loneliness, uncertainty. These emotions are not permanent states, they're visitors. And when you stop running, when you greet them like old teachers instead of enemies, they begin to reveal their lesson. Letting go also means letting go of control, of needing every emotion to make sense, of needing every feeling to be tidy, of needing your healing to happen on a timeline. It means giving up the illusion that peace can be manufactured, that if you just think the right thoughts or repeat the right affirmations, you'll never hurt again. That's not peace, that's pressure in disguise. True peace doesn't come from avoidance, it comes from acceptance. There's a quiet strength in someone who can sit with discomfort without needing to escape, who can cry without apologizing, who can feel fear and still breathe slowly, who can say this hurts and not rush to fix it. That strength doesn't come from toughness, it comes from tenderness, from a deep trust that no emotion is final, that even the darkest nights pass, that pain, when held with care, becomes something else: wisdom, compassion, understanding. We often chase freedom as if it's somewhere out there, beyond the next change, the next success, the next escape. But the freedom we're seeking isn't found in the absence of pain, it's found in our willingness to face it, to feel it, to let it move through us like a wave that doesn't need to be stopped, only witnessed. That's what real letting go looks like. Not a heroic release, but a quiet softening, a gentle return to what's real. You don't need to pretend you're okay. You don't need to hide your hurt to be worthy of peace. You just need to meet yourself honestly, fully, to say, this is where I am, and that's okay. Letting go doesn't mean letting the pain define you. It means letting it pass through you. It means holding it with open hands instead of closed fists. And in that openness, it begins to shift. Pain teaches you how to be present. It teaches you where your edges are. It invites you to become intimate with your humanity. And if you allow it, it will show you parts of yourself you didn't know were there. Not because you wanted them, but because you needed them. Resilience, clarity, empathy, all born from sitting with what hurts rather than escaping it. The letting go paradox reminds us that true freedom is not the absence of discomfort, it's the absence of resistance to it. That the moment you stop running from pain is the moment you start reclaiming your life. Not a perfect life, not a pain-free life, but a real one, a full one, a life where all parts of you are welcome, even the parts that ache. So sit with your discomfort, breathe with it, let it speak, let it move, and then, when it's ready, let it go. Not because you forced it out, but because you no longer needed to hold it so tightly. Trust the process. Trust your heart. Trust that even in your pain, you are growing. You are unfolding. You are healing in ways you cannot always see. And maybe that's what letting go really is. Not something you do, but something you allow. Not an action, but a surrender. A quiet permission to feel, to breathe, to be. The passion paradox. Passion begins as a spark, a quiet thrill that lights up when you're doing something you love. It's unforced, unfiltered, unmeasured. It flows through you without demand. Maybe it shows up when you're painting, or writing, or building, or simply losing yourself in the joy of creating. It starts small, an interest, a curiosity, a fascination, and before you know it, it becomes a part of who you are. Something that brings color to your world, something that makes you feel alive. But somewhere along the way, many of us are told to turn that spark into a living, to monetize it, to make it productive, And this is where the passion paradox begins. The more you make your passion your job, the less passionate you may feel about it. At first, it seems like a dream, doing what you love for a living, getting paid to create, to share, to express, and sometimes that dream becomes reality. But with that reality comes a subtle shift. What was once play becomes work. What was once freedom becomes structure. What was once done in quiet joy now carries the weight of deadlines, of expectations, of performance. You begin to ask different questions. Not what do I feel like creating today, but what will sell. Not what excites me, but what's trending. And slowly, the thing you once turned to for relief begins to ask something from you in return. This isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes passion and profession align beautifully. Sometimes doing what you love for a living deepens your relationship with it. But other times, the pressure begins to overshadow the play. You start to feel guilt for resting, anxiety when the inspiration fades. You begin to measure your success not by how much joy the work brings, but by how much it earns. And something quiet inside you begins to dim, not because the love is gone, but because it's been wrapped in responsibility. The paradox is that passion doesn't respond well to pressure. It needs space. It needs spontaneity. It thrives on freedom. When you cage it with expectations, when every creative act must also be productive, it starts to shrink. What was once an escape becomes an obligation. What was once sacred becomes scheduled. And when that happens, even the act of doing what you love can begin to feel strangely hollow. We often tell ourselves that turning passion into profession is the ultimate goal, that we've succeeded when our hobbies pay our bills. And for some, that's true. But it's also okay if it's not. It's okay to let your passion stay personal, to protect it from pressure, to let it live in a space untouched by commerce. Not everything you love needs to become something you sell. Not everything you create needs to be shared. Some things are meant to be yours alone. A private joy, a sacred ritual, a moment of connection with yourself, not your audience. When passion becomes your job, it often starts to answer to others, to clients, to markets, to metrics, and over time that outward focus can drown out your inner voice. The voice that first called you to the work, the voice that said, "This feels good," before anyone else had an opinion. That voice is still there, but it gets quieter when the noise of expectation gets loud. And unless you make time to listen, you may forget why you started in the first place. The passion paradox teaches us that love and labor are not always meant to mix, that joy and obligation live on different frequencies, that you can still be passionate about something without needing to monetize it, and that sometimes keeping your passion separate from your paycheck is the very thing that keeps it alive. It stays pure, unburdened, untouched by the weight of outcomes. This doesn't mean you can't pursue your dreams. It doesn't mean you shouldn't follow what lights you up. But it does mean being mindful of how pressure affects your relationship to what you love. It means checking in with yourself, asking, do I still feel connected to this? Am I still creating from joy or only from necessity? Have I made space for play, or has it all become performance? You can do what you love and still need a break from it. You can feel grateful and still feel burned out. You can be passionate and still long for distance. These things don't cancel each other out. They coexist. And when you allow them to, you stop feeling guilty for needing rest. You stop pushing through just to prove your devotion. You start honoring the rhythm of your relationship with your passion, the ebbs and flows, the seasons of fire and the seasons of stillness. Sometimes, The best thing you can do for your passion is step away. Give it space to breathe. Let it become play again. Do it without tracking your time, without measuring your worth, without wondering who will see it. Let it be messy. Let it be imperfect. Let it be yours. And you may find that the joy returns, not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying to control it. There's a different kind of success, one that isn't tied to monetization, metrics, or marketability. It's the success of staying connected to what you love, of not losing the spark in the pursuit of the spotlight, of doing something simply because it feels like home. That kind of success may not be loud, it may not be celebrated, but it is sustaining. It nourishes you, even when the world isn't watching. You don't have to turn your passion into your profession to live a meaningful life. You don't have to monetize your joy to justify it. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is protect it. Let it be what it was before it became useful. Let it be what it was before it was a brand, before it was a platform, before it was packaged and sold. Let it return to what it was in the beginning. Just a feeling. Moment. A connection between you and something larger. The passion paradox reminds us that freedom is not always found in turning what you love into what you do. Sometimes, freedom is found in letting it stay separate, in letting it be wild, in letting it be something you do, not to produce, but to feel, to remember who you are beneath the noise, to come back to your center when the world pulls you away. So if you feel the spark dimming, pause. Don't push, don't force, don't assume you've lost your passion. Maybe it's just asking for a different kind of relationship, one with less pressure, one with more space, one where love leads again, not obligation. Let it rest, let it breathe, let it surprise you, and when it returns, meet it with open hands, not expectation. Because the more you try to make your passion your job, the more it can start to feel like work. But when you let it be what it truly is, an offering, a joy, a spark, you remember why it mattered in the first place. Not because it paid you, not because it performed, but because it made you feel alive.